In July of 2014, a young German man walked into an airport in Varna, Bulgaria, wearing the same clothes he'd been vacationing in just days before. He looked nervous, restless. Security cameras caught him walking, and then, out of nowhere, he bolted, leaving behind his passport, phone, and wallet. He ran out of the terminal, climbed a high fence, disappeared into a field, and was never seen again. His name was Lars Mittank. In the years since his disappearance, Lars has become one of the most widely recognized missing persons on the internet. His final moments, caught on CCTV footage, have sparked millions of views and even more questions. Was he running from someone? From something? Today, we'll be looking into the mysterious disappearance of Lars Mittank. Number 1. Who was Lars? Lars Joachim Mittank was born on February 9, 1986 in Berlin, Germany. He grew up in the quiet town of Itzehoe in Schleswig-Holstein, which he lived in most of his life. Those who knew him described him as friendly, grounded, and responsible. He worked at a local power plant, maintained close relationships with his friends, and was in a committed relationship with his girlfriend. Lars was also a devoted son. After his father suffered from a stroke, Lars began helping his parents regularly, often visiting them after long shifts at work. I mean, you understand, he was just a normal guy. Nothing was unusual or particularly troubling about him. By all accounts, he lived a normal life. But that's what makes his story scary, because it just goes to show it can happen to anyone. In July 2014, during a trip to Bulgaria, something happened, and within days, Lars would just vanish without a trace. Number 2. What happened to him? It was Lars Mittank's first time traveling abroad. In late June 2014, he flew to Bulgaria with 5 of his childhood friends and former schoolmates, all in their late 20s. They went on a summer holiday in Varna, a lively beach resort, along the country's Black Sea coast. They spent a week relaxing in the sun, swimming, playing football, and going out at night. According to his friends, Lars seemed happy. He was in good spirits and enjoying the trip, but a few small things stood out. Tim Schultz, one of the friends, recalled that Lars wasn't eating much. He would have a bowl of soup or a small plate of salad, and that was it, he said. But nothing else seemed unusual. Lars was still being himself, relaxed, and whatever was going on, if anything, didn't raise alarms. Then, on the night of July 6th, just one day before their scheduled flight back home to Germany, something changed. While out at a bar in town, Lars got into a heated argument with another group of German tourists. The fight was reportedly over football. Lars was a fan of SV Werder Bremen, and the others supported FC Bayern Munich. At some point, the tension escalated. Later that night, Lars separated from his group outside of a restaurant and vanished. He reappeared the next morning at their resort and claimed that he had been attacked, beaten by 4 men who he believed had been hired by the football fans he clashed with at the bar. He told his friends the attack left him with a jaw injury and ruptured eardrum. Concerned, Lars visited a doctor in Varna. The doctor reportedly confirmed the eardrum injury and advised him not to fly, warning the change in cabin pressure could make it worse. Lars was prescribed an antibiotic, cefuroxime, 500 milligrams, and told to delay his return home by at least a day. When the group checked out of the hotel later that day, Lars made an unexpected announcement that he would not be joining them on the flight back to Hamburg. He told them he'd be fine and insisted that they return home without him. Despite their concerns, he reassured them that he would catch the next flight once he was cleared to travel. That was the last time they saw him. So, after deciding not to board the flight with his friends, on July 7th, 2014, Lars Mittank moved into a nearby budget accommodation, Hotel Keller in Varna. It was a small and expensive hotel located close to the airport, in one of the city's rougher neighborhoods, reportedly known for crime, prostitution, and black market activity. At first, everything seemed fine, but within 24 hours, Lars's behavior would spiral into a disturbing turn. That night, he called his mother, Sandra, speaking in a whisper. He told her that people were trying to rob or kill him, and he urged her to cancel his credit cards. Hotel CCTV footage from that evening captured Lars pacing the halls, peering anxiously out the windows, and hiding in the elevator. Around 1 a.m., he left the hotel for about an hour before returning. Where he went during that time remains unknown. And by the morning of July 8th, Lars was still showing signs of distress. He called his mother again, saying that people were following him and were getting closer. Despite being visibly paranoid and agitated, he checked out of the hotel and took a trip to Varna Airport. He sent a text to his mother that he had arrived and he intended to fly home that day, and before boarding, he visited the airport medical center to confirm whether he was fit to fly. There, he met Dr. Kosta Kostov. According to Kostov, Lars was nervous and erratic throughout the visit. Although the doctor reassured him that he was well enough to fly, Lars became increasingly anxious, particularly after a construction worker entered the room. The airport was undergoing renovation at the time, and the workers wore uniforms. Seeing the man, Lars panicked and he reportedly shouted, "I don't want to die here, I have to get out of here." And then, without warning, he bolted from the doctor's office, leaving behind all of his personal belongings, his luggage, wallet, passport, and mobile phone. Surveillance footage captured what happened next. Lars ran out of the terminal, through the parking area, and across the airport grounds. He reached a high barbed wire fence at the airport's edge, jumped it, and sprinted across a sunflower field. The final footage shows him disappearing into the fields. That was the last confirmed sighting of Lars Mittank. Number 3. The aftermath. In the days and weeks following Lars Mittank's disappearance, his family, friends, and investigators were left with more questions than answers. He was the outdoors type, and he had some knowledge of hunting, fishing, and basic survival. Could he have managed to live off the land after fleeing the airport? Some local experts doubted it. The area surrounding Varna Airport is mostly open fields with little shelter, food, or water. Summers are harsh, with temperatures often reaching the mid-90s Fahrenheit. Police brought in drones and cadaver dogs, even using a helicopter to sweep a 20-kilometer radius, and they found nothing, not a single trace. Sandra, his mother, hired a private investigator named Andreas Gutig. He flew to Varna, pored over the airport surveillance footage, combed through hospital records, and visited homeless shelters, searching for any unidentified patients who might match Lars's description. He found nothing. Flyers were distributed throughout the region, 180 centimeters tall, blonde hair, scar on his left forearm, but nothing. Despite the odds, Sandra had never given up hope. "There's a good chance he'll come back," she once said. "He just needs my help." Over the years, there have been alleged sightings. A truck driver claimed to see someone who looked like Lars hitchhiking on a remote road near Varna a year after the disappearance. Others reported spotting a homeless man in Poland who bore a striking resemblance. One Reddit user swore they met him in Canada, writing, "He looked rough, almost homeless. I'm 99.9% sure it's him." But what would he be doing in Canada? In 2019, another truck driver, this time in Germany, picked up a hitchhiker near Dresden. Later, after learning about the case, he realized the man looked like an older version of Lars. Same build, long hair, beard, tired eyes, prominent cheekbones, but as with the others, nothing could be confirmed. Some claims were more disturbing. In 2016, someone claiming to have access to information about Lars contacted the family and asked for money. Desperate for answers, the Mittanks paid 40,000 euros, but they never heard back. Whether the person was a scammer remains unclear, but the loss was devastating. That same year, hope briefly flared again. Police in Porto Velho, Brazil, found a man wandering barefoot along a highway. Disoriented and confused, he had no ID, and he couldn't even remember his name. He bore a strong resemblance to Mars. A photo of him in a hospital bed circulated widely online. Could it be him? But it wasn't. This man was Anton Pilipa, a Canadian humanitarian worker who had gone missing 5 years earlier. He was reunited with his family, but still, Sandra clung to the hope that one day her son might have the same ending. "If my child is in trouble, then I have to help," she said. "I have a feeling that he needs me." Nearly 4 years after his disappearance, Lars had become one of the most talked about missing persons on YouTube. Clips of his final moments, fleeing barefoot from the airport, appeared in countless mystery compilations, and yet nothing new has come to light. Despite international attention, online discourse, private investigators, and media coverage in both Germany and Bulgaria, Lars Mittank has never been found. He simply vanished. Number 4. Theories. In the years since Lars Mittank vanished, countless theories have emerged in an attempt to explain what drove a seemingly ordinary young man to flee an airport in panic and disappear without a trace. One of the earliest and most persistent theories suggests that Lars wasn't hallucinating when he told his mother he was being followed. According to this theory, the 4 men who allegedly assaulted him on the night of July 6th in Varna may have continued to stalk him in the days that followed. It's been suggested that Lars might have provoked them further, perhaps during the fight or after escaping and feared retaliation. This could explain his growing paranoia, especially once his friends had left him alone in a foreign country. But there are holes in this theory. No one else, including his friends or witnesses, ever reported seeing anyone suspicious in those few days. And Lars himself seemed calm and composed until the days after his friend flew home. So if there were no men following him, then who or what was he running from? Well, another theory suggests that Lars somehow became entangled in organized crime during his time in Varna. In this version, the men who attacked him weren't just football fans, they were criminals. After the fight, they may have made him an offer, help them transport drugs, or face serious serious consequences. The theory speculates that Lars agreed out of fear. His decision to stay behind while his friends returned to Germany was then not just about an injury, it was a cover. The location of Hotel Keller, in a crime-heavy district known for trafficking and black market activities, adds another layer of credibility to this theory. In this version, Lars's odd behavior at the hotel, his whispered phone calls to his mother, and his panic at the airport are all signs of men caught in something far bigger than he could handle. But again, there's little hard evidence to support this. No drugs were found in Lars's luggage, he had no criminal record, and no known ties to any organization, and no motive. He didn't speak Bulgarian or Russian, and he had no prior experience with smuggling or trafficking. And if he were truly being coerced, then why didn't he go to the police or tell his friends? I'm sure somebody would have been able to help him. Now, a less explored but intriguing theory centers on Dr. Kosta Kostav, the airport physician who had treated Lars on the morning of his disappearance. Over time, Dr. Kosta gave conflicting accounts of what happened in the examination room. We mentioned the version where he said a construction worker came into the room scaring Lars, but in another, it was a man in an airport uniform, and a third version claimed the man's identity was entirely unknown. Police later tracked down someone thought to be this mystery person, only to find out that he wasn't even in Bulgaria that day. The inconsistencies are troubling. Why would someone walk into a private medical exam without a reason? Why was an airline employee supposedly searching for Lars so early at 9 a.m. when his flight wasn't until 4:20 p.m.? And how could they have known where he was? Authorities have ruled out Costa as a suspect. There's no known motive, but the contradictions in his testimony have led some to believe that either he was lying or that something deeper and more alarming took place in that room. Unfortunately, that exam room was one of the few blind spots in the airport. There are no CCTV cameras documenting what actually happened. But, without a doubt, the most widely accepted theories around Lars Mittank's disappearance point to a sudden mental health crisis, or a rare medical reaction. Some believe that Lars suffered some kind of psychological break in the final days of his trip, an episode that might explain his anxiety, erratic behavior, and ultimately his desperate flight from the airport. One of the first suspects in this theory is the antibiotic Lars was prescribed, cefprozil, a cephalosporin used to treat infections like the ruptured eardrum that he had. While this drug is widely used in Bulgaria, it's less common in Germany, and German health officials have warned about rare but serious side effects, such as paranoia, hallucinations, and drug-induced psychosis. Those side effects are extremely rare, but they're not impossible, especially when mixed with other substances. Lars had been drinking during the vacation, and it's unclear whether he may have taken other medications, prescription or recreational, and that could have interacted poorly with cefprozil. Adding to the fuel, his prescribed dosage was 500 milligrams, considered high for that medication. Some experts believe that a combination of high dosage, previous alcohol use, and psychological stress would have triggered a reaction. What's even more troubling is that Lars himself seemed suspicious of the drug. On the night his paranoia began, he texted his mother, "What is Cefzil 500?" a question that suggests that he was feeling unwell and unsure of what he had been prescribed. However, this theory hits a wall. According to Dr. Costa, he never even took the antibiotic. He didn't fill the prescription, Costa said, so his behavior couldn't have been a result of that. I can't think of a single reason why he left my office in such a panic. I am still confused. If anything Costa said is to be believed, if not the medication, then maybe it was something deeper. Some believe Lars may have experienced the early signs of schizophrenia, a condition that often presents in young adults before the age of 30. Symptoms can include paranoia, delusions, fear of being followed, and intense sensory experiences, many of which Lars displayed. His age, stress levels, and the timing all align with the onset of such a disorder, but his family insists that he had no history of mental illness, and no doctors back home had ever considered him a risk. Another possibility is a more severe, undiagnosed brain condition. Some have speculated that Lars may have suffered from a neurological event such as a concussion, repeated brain trauma, or even small aneurysms. This could have caused the symptoms like confusion, panic, or even retrograde amnesia, especially if he was convinced that something was deeply wrong with his health, but he wasn't being taken seriously. This could explain why he fled both the hospital and the airport's doctor office. Perhaps he believed that he was dying and no one was listening. There are also theories involving hypochondria or psychological trauma following the alleged assault, pushing him into a sort of spiral of fear and paranoia. But even these ideas struggle to explain everything. Lars was still functioning. He was coherent enough to navigate travel logistics, contact his mother multiple times, and manage banking and phone services. He may have been deeply distressed, but he wasn't completely disconnected from reality. The tragic truth is, despite countless attempts to analyze and understand his behavior, no theory fully explains what pushed Lars to run out of that airport. Whether it was mental illness, a bad reaction to medication, or the invisible weight of psychological trauma, whatever happened happened, it left Lars alone, vulnerable, and ultimately missing. Number 5. Conclusion. After going through everything, every report, theory, and bit of footage, I don't think there's one simple answer to what happened to Lars Mittank. What makes this case so difficult is that it doesn't follow a clean path. There's no definitive proof of foul play, but there's also no clear evidence of a mental health crisis either. What I believe is that Lars's disappearance was a result of several small things stacking up, until they became too much to carry. Lars wasn't unstable. He was a guy with a job, a girlfriend, and a family that deeply cared about him. But he was also tired from work, responsibility, and stress back home. That kind of pressure wears a person down, and you don't always notice it until it's too late. Then came the trip to Bulgaria. What was supposed to be a break turned into a nightmare. On the fight of July 6th, whether random or something deeper, left him psychologically hurt and possibly mentally shaken. It's entirely possible that he suffered a mild head injury, something like a concussion, and wasn't taken seriously at the time. That kind of trauma doesn't always show right away, but it does mess with your sense of reality, your fear response, and your thoughts. And after his friends left, things only got worse. He was alone in a foreign country, staying in a sketchy hotel in a neighborhood known for crime. He wasn't eating, he wasn't sleeping. He started whispering to his mother, convinced that people were after him. Whether or not that fear was rooted in something real, to him, it was real. And that's what matters. I don't think he was involved in drugs or crime, nor do I think he staged anything. I think that he was just a scared man spiraling, mentally, emotionally, physically, and no one around him knew how bad it really was. Maybe it was fear, maybe trauma, maybe paranoia brought on by the stress, or by something undiagnosed, or even neurological. But whatever happened in that airport, it wasn't calculated. And what happened after? Well, that's the part that none of us can answer. He could have collapsed in the forest, he could have kept on running, he could be living somewhere right now, without his memories, lost in a life that isn't his. I hope he's still out there, I really do, because whatever led to that moment, it wasn't evil. And maybe, if we keep on talking about him with care and not just curiosity, we might still find him. Lars Mittank was more than just a viral clip. He was a son, a friend, and a young man with a future. His story deserves to be told with the hope that one day, he might come home. Do you have some thoughts about this whole story? Let me know in the comments. Sometimes the scariest stories don't start with blood, or screams, or even a trace of violence. Sometimes they begin with a note. Back in 2 minutes. That's all it said, scribbled in handwriting, taped to a shop window on a sunny afternoon in a quiet Welsh town. And then, silence. No struggle, no witnesses, no return. Her name was Trevelyan Evans, a 52-year-old antiques dealer, beloved in her community. No enemies, no warning signs, just a normal day in a normal town that ended in one of the most baffling disappearances the UK has ever seen. Over 30 years later, her case remains a mystery. Was it a crime of opportunity, a carefully planned escape, or something much darker hiding in plain sight? This is the story of a woman who vanished in the middle of the day, and the trail of dead ends, strange sightings, and eerie coincidences she left behind. Just an ordinary life. You know, before a mystery becomes a mystery, it's just someone's life. Quiet, normal, and overlooked. That's exactly what makes this one so haunting. Trevelyan Evans was born Trevelyan Davies on September 6, 1937, in the small Welsh town of Llangollen, a picturesque little place, the kind that clings to routine and remembers every face that passes through. Nestled in the hills of Denbighshire, it's the sort of town that you would expect to see on a postcard, not in a police file. She lived in Llangollen her entire life, married her husband, Richard Evans, in 1958. They had one child together, a son, also named Richard, who would later become a police sergeant. Sadly, he passed away in 1999 from a sudden heart attack, just a few years after his mother vanished. He left behind a wife and 2 young sons. From all accounts, Trevelyan lived what you would call a normal life, but it was a happy one. She was kind, quiet, deeply rooted in her community. She had a deep love for antiques, and in 1989, just 1 year before she disappeared, she finally fulfilled a dream by opening a small shop called Attic Antiques, tucked away on a church street, right near the River Dee. It was a simple, modest place, the kind of shop that you could easily walk past if you weren't looking, but locals knew it well. It sold everything from vintage furniture to old trinkets, and reflected her taste. In the week leading up to her disappearance, Trevelyan had been away near Rhuddlan, helping her husband renovate their holiday bungalow. She returned to Llangollen on Wednesday, June 13th, just a few days before she vanished. There isn't much else that we know about her early life. In many ways, she was a private person, someone who kept things close. And maybe that's part of what makes this case so frustrating. Because even though she lived in the open, Trevelyan Evans somehow disappeared without leaving so much as a footprint behind. Only a note. A disappearance. June 16th, 1990. A Saturday. Sunny skies over the small Welsh town of Llangollen. The kind of day where nothing bad should happen. But something did, and it began in a whisper. Trevelyan Evans opened her antique shop, Attic Antiques, at 9:30 a.m. She drove her dark blue Ford Escort, parked it around 200 yards from her shop, and started the day just like any other. The town was busy, the shop even busier, with nearly 25 people stopping by that morning. Friends, regular customers, and they all said the same thing. She seemed relaxed, happy. She was looking forward to going out that evening. There was nothing off, no tension, and no nerves. Just a woman doing what she loved in a place that she knew well. And then, at around 12:40 p.m., Trevelyan did something that she had done before on slower days. She stepped out, leaving a handwritten note on the shop door. Back in 2 minutes. It was her usual phrasing, routine. She didn't take her handbag, her keys, or even her jacket. The shop was left unlocked. Fruit and flowers that she had planned to take home were still sitting inside. She was spotted shortly after, around 1 p.m., buying an apple and a banana on High Street. Then she crossed Castle Street, and that was the last confirmed time that anyone saw her out in public. But here's where things got strange. A banana peel was later found in the trash bin inside the shop, so did she return? Or had she eaten it earlier and just threw it out before stepping out? Police couldn't be sure, but the idea that she came back, however briefly, made things even harder to explain. The last confirmed sighting of Trevelyan was around 2:30 p.m., seen by someone who knew her walking down Market Street near her home. After that, nothing certain. There were 2 unconfirmed sightings later that day. One, 5 minutes after 2:30, of a woman resembling Trevelyan walking out of town along the A5 by Riverside Park. And another at 3:45 p.m. of a similar-looking woman walking into Park Avenue from the direction of the River Dee. Whether either of those women were Trevelyan has never been verified. Then there's this detail. Around 6 p.m., a woman driving by Attic Antiques thought she saw a man standing outside the shop. She couldn't be sure, but it looked like the door was open. But when Trevelyan's family arrived later that night, it was locked, so who locked it? Inside the shop, nothing had changed. Her makeup compact was left open on the counter, her handbag with credit cards untouched, her car keys, her jacket, the fruit and flowers that she had planned to bring home. Everything was right where she had left it. But Trevelyan was gone. Her husband, Richard, had just returned from their holiday home in Rhuddlan that afternoon. He reported her missing at around 11 p.m. after searching and getting no answers. From that moment forward, it was no longer just a quiet Saturday in Llangollen. It was the beginning of a mystery that's never been solved. The aftermath. After Trevelyan vanished, Llangollen didn't feel like the same town anymore. What happened was one of the largest investigations North Wales had ever seen. Police took over 330 statements, conducted more than 1,500 interviews within a 12-mile radius, and eliminated nearly 700 cars from their inquiries. Every household in Llangollen was questioned. Posters with Trevelyan's face were everywhere. Her husband, Richard, even offered a £5,000 reward. They searched the River Dee, the canal, the mine shafts, the caves, anywhere that she could have ended up. Nothing. Not a single clue. The case quickly caught national attention. It aired twice on Crime Watch, sparking calls and sightings from all over the UK, and far beyond. There were reports of her being seen in London, France, and even a remote town in Australia. Interpol got involved. Each lead was checked, and every single one fell apart. There was one detail people kept on circling back to: the well-dressed man. Multiple witnesses claimed to have seen Trevelyan talking with a smartly dressed older man on June 14th and 15th, just before she disappeared. He wore a navy suit and carried a black briefcase. A sketch of the man was drawn up and circulated, but it didn't help. When the case was reopened years later, police no longer believed that the sketch was even accurate. Whoever he was never even identified. And that lead, like everything else, went cold. Despite the massive investigations, no money was ever withdrawn from her bank account. Her passport was untouched. Police started to believe that she hadn't walked away on her own. In 1992, they even followed a psychic's tip, searching the World's End woodland, a stretch of forest outside town, and later the Canal Bays with sniffer dogs based on another feeling from a letter writer. Desperate people grasp at desperate threats, but again, nothing. In 2001, they reopened the case. Forensics had advanced by then, and police hoped that something, anything, might finally break. They even arrested Trevelyan's husband, Richard. He was questioned but quickly released without charge. It was the only time anyone was ever arrested in connection with the case. Then came 2010, 20 years after she disappeared. The case was reviewed again, and a new angle surfaced. Robin Ligas, a convicted serial killer serving life for murdering 3 men in 1994, one of whom was an antique dealer. Police considered a possible connection, but by January 2012, that theory was officially ruled out. And then something strange. In 2019, 2 brothers, Andrew and Lee Sutton, contacted police with what they claimed was new evidence. They said that Trevelyan's body was buried beneath Rutland Golf Club, the same town where her holiday home was located. They said that they had used special camera equipment and believed that they had found skeletal remains, including a skull and a hand, under the club's bar floor. They even claimed a forensic expert backed their findings. Police took it seriously, and on March 19th, they brought in X-ray equipment, cordoned off the area, and began a controlled excavation. An officer was even stationed there overnight, but in the end, they found nothing, not a single bone. The Sutton brothers stood by their story. They filed a formal complaint alleging the body had been removed in the 5-day gap between their inspection and the official dig. They even said that they had received threatening phone calls and that someone had smashed a window in Andrew's home. The police again couldn't confirm any of it. And then came the plaque. In January 2021, a metal plaque appeared on a bench along the Perstaten Dursith walkway, just 4 miles from Evans' holiday bungalow. It read, "In memory of Trevelyan Evans, vanished 16/6/1990, found Rutland GC 14/3/2019, removed 19/3/2019, RIP." The implication was chilling, that her body had been found and then removed. The plaque was removed by the county council after being defaced and surrounded by an all-night vigil. A second plaque appeared in May, this time at Pant y Fatwan, the ruins of an old miner's cottage. It read, "Justice awaits those responsible for the removal and disposal of Trevelyan Evans, in this life or the next, from Rutland Golf Club on 19/3/2019 at noon, and may the Lord have mercy upon their souls." Same font, same ominous tone, but no one ever claimed responsibility. The Sutton brothers denied placing either plaque. By this point, Trevelyan's family had mostly faded from public view. Her son passed away in 1999, her husband in 2015. Her younger brother, Leonard, hadn't spoken to the press in years, and without any immediate family pushing for answers, the case had slowly fallen back into silence. And yet, more than 3 decades later, Trevelyan Evans remains officially missing. No suspect, no confession, no body. Theories and suspects. When someone vanishes into thin air, people want reasons, explanations, a pattern to follow. And when there's none, when the evidence just isn't there, what fills the silence is theory, speculation, and rumors. In the case of Trevelyan Evans, there have been plenty of all three. With no solid leads and no movement on her bank accounts, authorities came to believe that she hadn't simply walked away from her life. And in 1997, 7 years after she had vanished, Trevelyan Evans was legally declared dead. Murder was now the assumed outcome. The husband, Richard Evans. The first theory, and the one that had circled the longest, is the most obvious: her husband, Richard Evans. When the case was reopened in 2001, police turned their focus to him. Richard was questioned and even arrested, but ultimately released without charge. On paper, Trevelyan and Richard were described as happily married, but behind the scenes, there were rumors. People talked about an affair, one that Trevelyan may have been having. There was talk of a man who had left her over £10,000 in his will, and how that money had strained the marriage. A woman named Linda, an ex-girlfriend of Trevelyan's brother, claimed that Trevelyan had confided in her just 2 days before she disappeared, According to her, the marriage wasn't as peaceful as it seemed. Then there's the timeline. Official reports initially stated that Richard had been working in Rudlin on June 16th and didn't return to Longolin until that night. But another account places him in a pub in Longolin at around 2:30 p.m., the exact time of Trevelyan's last confirmed sighting. If that's true, then Richard was back in town earlier than he said, and didn't report her missing until around 11 p.m. Why the delay? But here's the thing. Police never found any forensic evidence to implicate him. No witnesses, no suspicious purchases, nothing to suggest premeditation. Richard never remarried and lived quietly until his death in 2015, outliving both his son and, presumably, his wife. If he was hiding something, he took it with him. Stranger abduction or misadventure. There's also the stranger danger theory that she left her shop expecting to be gone for just a moment, back in 2 minutes, and crossed paths with the wrong person at the wrong time. A crime of opportunity, the kind that you can't prepare for and can't see coming. But Longolin isn't a city. It's not anonymous, it's not chaotic. It was a bright, busy Saturday afternoon, and the town was packed with people. If someone attacked or coerced her, how did no one see anything? Still, the idea persists. Maybe she had gotten into someone's car, maybe she agreed to walk somewhere close, maybe she knew them, or thought she did. Another variation is accidental death. Maybe she had a fall or a medical episode. Maybe she wandered off into the wooded areas, the canal or the caves that dot the region, and simply wasn't found. But even then you would expect something. A body, a piece of clothing, something. Robin Ligas, the serial killer theory. So, as I mentioned before, in 2011, authorities explored a new possibility, that Robin Ligas, a convicted serial killer, may have been involved. Ligas murdered 3 men in 1994, and one of his victims was, of all things, an antiques dealer, killed just 30 miles from Longolin. The connection seemed worth exploring, but Ligas had a profile. His victims were all male, and he didn't go to any effort to hide the bodies. The idea that he would target a woman in broad daylight in a busy town and hide her so well that she was never found just didn't fit his known patterns. The theory was ruled out by police in 2012. Christopher Halliwell. In recent years, a new suspect has emerged in the disappearance of Trevelyan Evans, one that wasn't on the radar back in 1990, but whose criminal profile eerily fits. Christopher Halliwell, a former taxi driver and window fitter, is now serving a life sentence for the murders of Sian O'Callaghan, 2011, and Becky Godden, 2003. Both victims were young women abducted in seemingly ordinary circumstances and later found in remote locations, their bodies buried with care. Police now believe that Halliwell may have been active for years earlier than previously proven. At the time of Trevelyan's disappearance, Halliwell was working in North Wales, and one witness later placed him in Longolin on June 16th of 1990, the very day that he vanished. He traveled frequently for work, including for roles in construction and window fitting, and had connections to nearby regions like Ormskirk and Liverpool. Longolin, with its antique shops, riverside walks, and canal access, would not have been an unusual destination for him. What's unsettling is how well he fits into several threads of this case. Police were never able to identify a smartly dressed man in his 30s, even speaking with Trevelyan in the days leading up to her disappearance. The man was described as stocky, carrying a briefcase, and engaging in intense conversations with her. A photo fit was later issued, but later dismissed as inaccurate. Independent investigators have compared it to images of Halliwell from the 1990s, and the similarities are hard to ignore. Even more compelling are the behavioral parallels. Halliwell was known for his ability to persuade women rather than overpower them. His victims often went with him willingly, with no initial sign of struggle. In Trevelyan's case, there were no signs of forced abduction, no calls for help, no scuffle in the street. Just a note in the window saying that she would be back in 2 minutes. Her shop was untouched, her belongings still inside. This type of low-impact disappearance, where the victim seems to simply walk off, matches what Halliwell has done before. He also had a demonstrated connection to antique theft. In the early 1980s, Halliwell served time for burglarizing homes and stealing antiques. Trevelyan's shop, open to buyers and sellers of vintage goods, could easily have drawn his attention. She was known to buy from travelers, strangers, and anyone with something to offer. It's not hard to imagine that Halliwell stepped inside either to sell, scout, or stage a future crime. He also had the means to make someone vanish. Halliwell once buried a victim so successfully that her body wasn't found for nearly a decade. He had experience as a gravedigger, groundsman, and builder, and he knew how to hide things, and Trevelyan's body has never been found. Yet, despite the overlap, North Wales police have never officially linked Halliwell to her case. When pressed, they simply stated that there was no known link between him and any crimes in the region. But that absence of connection doesn't necessarily mean innocence. It might just mean that they haven't looked hard enough. One retired officer who investigated Halliwell had stated plainly that he believes that there are other victims out there, that Halliwell didn't start killing in his 40s, that he was already active long before he was caught. And if that's true, then Trevelyan Evans would fit perfectly into the timeline. But there is no smoking gun here, no fingerprints, no confession, just a man with the means, the method, and most disturbingly, the opportunity. This is one of those stories where the digger you deep, the less certain anything becomes. There are so many angles to Trevelyan Evans' disappearance, so many witnesses, sightings, suspects, false leads, and yet, for all of it, we're no closer to understanding what had really happened to her. The story feels complete in structure but hollow in answers, like a puzzle where the last piece just never existed in the first place. For me, the most unsettling detail isn't the timelines or gaps, or the unknown man in the blazer, it's the plaques. 2 metal plaques anonymously placed years later, suggesting that her body was found beneath a golf club bar and then removed. That's not the kind of thing someone writes lightly. It's not graffiti, it's deliberate, personal, and creepy in a way that words alone cannot fully explain. If the Sutton brothers are telling the truth, and I'm not saying they are or aren't, it just means that her body may have been discovered and then hidden again, erased. And if that's true, then someone knows exactly what happened. Someone has always known. But what kind of person does that? What kind of person plants a plaque in the middle of the night with an exact date and time, and then vanishes just like she did? Some point the finger at Christopher Halliwell, and yes, the overlap is chilling. The resemblance, the behavior, the access, he fits. But he was already in prison by the time those plaques were placed, which only raises more questions. If not him, then who? I wish I had a solid theory to give you, a satisfying bow to wrap this up, but I don't. Not really. Trevelyan Evans stepped outside for 2 minutes. She left her fruit and flowers behind, and she never came back. 34 years later, we're still staring at the note on the door, wondering where she went. And that's where we're left for the story of Trevelyan Evans. A woman steps out of her shop with a note that says back in 2 minutes and is never seen again. No struggle, no body, and no answers. Just decades of silence and speculation. I usually offer a theory, but in this case, I honestly don't know. The plaques, the sightings, the suspects, they only make things murkier. If someone does know the truth, they've stayed very quiet for a very long time. What do you think happened?
At approximately 1:15 a.m. on April 1st, 2006, security cameras captured 27-year-old medical student Brian Schaffer walking into the Ugly Tuna Saloon, a popular bar near Ohio State University, with his friends Clint Florence and Meredith Reed. It was the beginning of spring break, and the bar was bustling with excited patrons. However, those same cameras, constantly monitored and reviewed in detail by investigators, never recorded Brian leaving the bar. Despite a comprehensive search and exhaustive investigation, Brian Schaffer appeared to vanish inside a crowded establishment. The security footage showed no alternative exits or hidden passageways, just a single main entrance continuously under surveillance. Brian Schaffer entered the Ugly Tuna Saloon that night, but he never emerged. Nearly 2 decades later, his disappearance remains a baffling mystery, leaving investigators, friends, and family wondering how someone could vanish without a trace in plain sight. I still vividly remember seeing the surveillance footage for the first time. It seemed surreal. Brian Schaffer walked into the Ugly Tuna Saloon bar near Ohio State University on the night of March 31st, 2006, and was never seen again. Brian, a 27-year-old medical student, had spent that Friday celebrating the beginning of spring break. He started the evening by having dinner with his father, Randy, who later recalled that Brian seemed particularly exhausted due to late-night studying earlier in the week. Despite Randy's private reservations, Brian went out with his friend William Clint Florence around 9 p.m., starting their night at the Ugly Tuna Saloon. The two friends bar hopped, taking shots at several establishments as they moved through Columbus's popular nightlife areas. Around midnight, they met Meredith Reed, another friend of Clint's, who eventually drove them back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon for a final round of drinks. At about 1:15 a.m., cameras captured Brian, Clint, and Meredith entering the bar together. At 1:55 a.m., Brian was again seen on camera outside the bar's entrance, chatting briefly with two women before stepping out of frame. This was the last confirmed sighting of Brian Schaffer. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., Clint and Meredith couldn't locate Brian despite repeatedly calling his phone. Initially assuming he might have headed home without mentioning it, they left. However, as the weekend progressed without any communication from Brian, concern intensified. On Monday morning, when Brian failed to appear for a planned trip to Miami with his girlfriend, Alexis Wagoner, his family officially reported him missing to Columbus police. The police response was swift and methodical. Investigators first thoroughly reviewed the security footage from the Ugly Tuna Saloon. The main entrance and exit were under constant camera surveillance, yet Brian was not seen leaving after his last appearance on camera at 1:55 a.m. Police meticulously checked every available camera angle from adjacent areas and nearby bars, but found no trace of Brian leaving the premises. Investigators examined a secondary exit, a service door leading to a construction site near the bar, but concluded it would have been challenging to navigate, particularly if Brian had been intoxicated. Nonetheless, police did consider that this route could have allowed someone to leave undetected by cameras. The search quickly expanded beyond the bar itself. Officers and canine units combed the surrounding streets and alleyways, inspecting dumpsters, questioning residents, and even searching the city's sewer system. Brian's apartment was checked thoroughly. His car was still parked outside, and everything appeared normal. The Columbus community became deeply involved. Flyers displaying Brian's picture, along with distinctive features such as his Pearl Jam tattoo and a unique fleck in his iris, were distributed throughout the area. Despite these extensive efforts, no credible leads emerged. Months later, in September 2006, a moment of hope appeared when Alexis's nightly call to Brian's phone unexpectedly rang 3 times. Although the provider explained this as a technical glitch, it briefly reignited hope. The phone pinged at a tower near Hilliard, approximately 14 miles from where Brian vanished, though this was the only notable signal in the months following his disappearance. In the years that followed, several leads arose, but ultimately led nowhere. Reports of potential sightings came from as far away as Michigan, Texas, and even Sweden, all investigated and eventually dismissed by authorities. At a Pearl Jam concert in Cincinnati, Eddie Vedder appealed to the audience for any information about Brian, reflecting the widespread attention the case received. In September 2008, Randy Schaffer tragically died in an accident at his home, further compounding the emotional toll of Brian's disappearance. A condolence message claiming to be from Brian surfaced online shortly afterwards, suggesting he might have relocated to the US Virgin Islands. Authorities quickly debunked this as a cruel hoax. In 2019, an image surfaced online of an alleged American homeless man in Tijuana resembling Brian, sparking renewed interest. Columbus police sent the photo for FBI facial recognition analysis, which ruled out the possibility of it being Brian. Today, Brian Schaffer's disappearance remains one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in recent memory. Despite years of investigation, countless leads, and significant media coverage, no definitive answers have emerged. All we know for certain is that Brian Schaffer entered the Ugly Tuna Saloon on that spring night in 2006 and seemingly vanished without a trace. Brian Schaffer grew up in Pickerington, Ohio, a small, quiet suburb just outside of Columbus. Born in 1979, he was the older son of Randy and Renee Schaffer, and from all accounts, he was someone who naturally drew people in. Friends described Brian as charismatic, funny, and outgoing, one of those individuals who could easily make you laugh and feel comfortable. After graduating from high school in 1997, Brian went on to Ohio State University, OSU. He pursued microbiology, graduating in 2003 with clear ambitions ahead. Soon after, In 2004, he enrolled in OSU's College of Medicine, beginning the intense journey toward becoming a doctor. It was around this time that he met Alexis Wagner, a fellow medical student who quickly became an essential part of his life. Their relationship blossomed, and those closest to them believed Brian planned to propose during their upcoming spring break trip to Miami in April 2006. Brian wasn't just about medicine, though. He had an adventurous side and a deep love for tropical places. He often spoke of Miami and Puerto Rico, places he'd visited and fallen in love with, drawn by their laid-back atmosphere. His passion extended beyond travel. He adored music, particularly Pearl Jam, and often talked about his dream to someday start a band. In many ways, Brian seemed torn between his stable future in medicine and the free-spirited lifestyle he admired from musicians like Jimmy Buffett. Life wasn't without its struggles. In March 2006, Brian faced one of the toughest moments of his life when his mother, Renee, passed away from myelodysplasia, a rare and aggressive form of cancer. Despite this devastating loss, Brian's friends noticed how determined he remained, focusing intensely on his studies and future plans. Though clearly grieving, he never showed outward signs of depression or despair. Instead, he appeared hopeful and excited about his career, his life with Alexis, and the possibility of a bright future ahead. Yet, everything changed that April night in 2006. It left everyone baffled at what might have happened, and as word spread around, so did the theories. When someone vanishes without a trace, we tend to look for the simplest answer. But in Brian Schaffer's case, simple just doesn't cut it. We've seen the footage, we know the timeline, we know where he was last seen and where he wasn't. There's no obvious path forward. And so, nearly 20 years later, the case survives through theories. All of them have gaps. Some lean toward logic, others veer into speculation. But in a vacuum of answers, this is what we're left with. 1. Foul play. Among all theories, foul play is the one that continues to dominate most discussions, not because it's dramatic, but because it accounts for the sheer finality of Brian's disappearance. But the question isn't just if someone harmed Brian, it's who, how, and why in a setting crawling with people, cameras, and attention. There's no evidence of a struggle inside the bar. No witnesses ever came forward to say they saw something violent happen, but many believe the key moment occurred just outside during that short interaction with the two women. While the footage itself doesn't reveal anything conclusive, it's been dissected frame by frame online. Theories have formed around body language, that Brian looked distracted or even unsettled, that the women seemed to be arguing or confronting someone. But if we remove the emotional tone and examine possible motives, we're left with a few options. Was this a targeted act? Someone lying in wait? Or did Brian stumble into the wrong interaction at the worst time? One idea is that he encountered someone offering a ride or lured him somewhere under false pretenses, like a nearby after party. From there, things could have escalated quickly. A robbery gone wrong, a dispute over money, a bad drug deal. Importantly, this theory also offers one of the few explanations that can coexist with the idea of Brian having left the bar undetected. The construction site near the service exit has always been a wild card, difficult to navigate, but not impossible. If Brian was led out that way, possibly by someone familiar with the building layout, he could have exited without being caught on camera. What happened after that is where foul play proponents focus their attention. An isolated spot, no one around, a quick disappearance, and perhaps someone who knew how to stay quiet. What makes this theory more chilling is the case's complete lack of physical evidence. If Brian were killed, where would he be? How was his body moved without being seen? That's the sticking point. It's not that foul play is impossible, it's that whoever was involved, if anyone was, left behind no trace, not a single one. Second accident. Accidental death is another theory that remains on the table, though it's grown less convincing over time. The logic is straightforward. Brian, intoxicated, disoriented, maybe emotionally off balance, took a wrong turn and ended up in a place no one thought to look, or a place already searched but missed. The most cited possibility here is the construction site behind the bar. It was poorly lit, not monitored by full-time surveillance, and full of hazards. If Brian left via the service exit, unnoticed by the rotating camera, camera or during a blind spot, he could have slipped, fallen, or become trapped. Maybe in a hidden crawl space or ventilation shaft, maybe under debris, but the area was searched extensively, with dogs, multiple times. Nothing turned up. There's also the timeline problem. Brian's phone remained active briefly after he was last seen. That doesn't square well with a sudden fatal fall or a body hidden inside the construction site. His phone should have been found, if not by the police, then by someone else in the weeks and months that followed. The construction continued. People came and went. No sign of Brian ever appeared. So, unless he somehow ended up in a spot so concealed it's never been discovered, something that strains plausibility, the accident theory struggles to hold. Third, voluntary disappearance. To some, the cleanest answer is the most personal, that Brian chose to disappear. A man is grieving the recent loss of his mother, under pressure from medical school, maybe second-guessing his life path, maybe needing a reset. And yes, people have walked away from their lives before. Some planned it, some didn't. But to buy this theory, you have to believe Brian had the means and the mindset to vanish without telling anyone. Not his girlfriend, not his brother, not even his close friends. You also have to believe he maintained that separation for nearly 2 decades, never using his credit cards, never reaching out, never being spotted. No money was taken from his account, no travel records, no purchases, no sightings. Even when strange events occurred, like the fake condolence message after his father's death signed Love, Brian, US Virgin Islands, they led nowhere. It was a hoax traced to a public library. If Brian left, he left so thoroughly that no digital or physical trace has ever surfaced. That's not just rare, it's nearly impossible in today's world. So while this theory can't be ruled out entirely, the lack of preparation or evidence behind it makes it feel unlikely, and there's no clear motive. Brian had plans for the next day. He was supposed to be in Miami with Alexis, and as we know, that trip never happened. Fourth, fringe theories. When a case stays unsolved for this long, stranger ideas inevitably take root. One of the most popular fringe theories early on was the smiley face killer connection, a supposed serial killer or group targeting college-age men across the US, often leaving graffiti near water. Brian's body was never found near a river, and police have largely dismissed the pattern entirely. Still, the internet has kept it alive. Then there's the theory that Brian never left the building, that somehow he died inside the ugly tuna and was hidden by staff, either intentionally or by mistake. But the bar didn't shut down right away. It remained open for months. It was cleaned, inspected. No evidence ever turned up. If he were there, no one found him. Other suggestions have included secret identities, underground lives, or witness protection, the kind of theories that feel more like storytelling than deduction, but they reflect something real, the desperation to understand what happened when logic no longer provides an answer. 5. Reddit theory, the 3 women. Reading through online forums, Reddit threads, and Facebook groups that have followed this case closely over the years, I came across a theory that, while entirely speculative, tries to tie together many of the scattered and often overlooked details. It's not official, it's not backed by the police, but it's thorough and troubling. According to this theory, Brian didn't leave alone, and he didn't vanish into thin air. He may have left with 3 women, 2 of whom we know, Amber and Brighton, and 1 who remained unidentified for nearly 2 decades. This 3rd woman, recently spotted in reanalyzed footage, arrived at the Ugly Tuna with Amber, while Brighton apparently arrived later, contradicting previous statements both women gave to police and podcast host Kelly Bruce. Why was this 3rd woman's presence hidden for so long? That's the question that launched this entire theory. The core idea is that Brian planned to meet the women outside the bar, potentially for an after-party or private hangout. He was reportedly flirting with Brighton earlier in the night, and it's possible he told his friends he was going to speak to the band as a cover to slip away unnoticed, either to avoid conflict with his friend Clint or to keep it discreet. From there, the theory suggests that Brian got into a car with the 3 women and left the area, and something went wrong. Maybe an overdose, an accident, a fight, or a drunken misunderstanding. The theory doesn't claim murder, but rather an unexpected death that was quickly concealed in panic. Now here's where it deepens. Brian's phone pinged in the Hilliard area after his disappearance, near Scioto Darby Creek Road. Public records show that Brighton previously lived near that location. Not just 1 address, 2, and the now infamous Love Brian US Virgin Islands, condolence message posted after his father's death, traced to a public library just a few minutes away from those same addresses. Is it circumstantial? Completely, but it doesn't stop there. Reddit users also tracked posts defending Brighton under suspicious usernames that were created solely to comment on her involvement in the case. Were these burner accounts? No way to prove it, but it adds to the unease. The theory ends with the suggestion that Brian died that night, unintentionally, and the women, possibly with others, covered it up. His phone was disposed of near Brighton's neighborhood, maybe powered on once or twice before being dumped permanently. The library hoax, possibly an ill-advised way to create the illusion that Brian had fled to start a new life. This isn't proven, it's just a theory, but it ties together footage anomalies, false statements, the phone pings, geographic proximity, and behavior that, if nothing else, warrants a second look. After looking through every angle, every timeline, and every theory, official and unofficial, I have to admit something up front. I don't know what happened to Brian Schaffer. No one really does, and that's what makes this case so haunting. But if I had to say what I believe, I lean toward foul play. Something happened to Brian that night, something that wasn't supposed to happen. And from everything I've read, watched, and researched, the theory involving the three women, Amber, Brighton, and the unidentified third woman, makes the most sense to me. It's not a theory I take lightly. I'm not accusing anyone, but when you connect the timeline discrepancies, the hidden identities, the odd behavior in interviews, the proximity of the phone pings to personal addresses, and that strange condolence message traced to a local library, it just feels like too much coincidence in a case where nothing else adds up. Whether Brian left with them willingly, whether it was an accident that spiraled, or whether something darker took place, we may never know. But I believe the answers lie with the last people who saw him. And until someone talks or evidence surfaces, we'll be stuck in the dark, still wondering how a man walked into a bar and never came out. In the quiet English village of Shepton Mallet, nestled in the rolling hills of Somerset, one mystery has echoed through the centuries, an unsolved vanishing that still captures the imagination of locals and historians alike. This is the case of Owen Parfitt, a man whose disappearance in the 18th century remains one of England's oldest and most baffling enigmas. To understand the strangeness of his case, we must first understand the man himself. Owen Parfitt was no ordinary villager. In his youth, he was known for his adventurous spirit and colourful past. Rumours swirled about his exploits, stories of military service in Africa, brushes with piracy, and a reputation as a bold womanizer. Whether these tales were entirely true or embellished over time, they contributed to the complex, almost legendary aura that surrounded him. By the late 1760s, however, Owen's days of adventure were long behind him. Age and illness had taken their toll, leaving him nearly paralysed and entirely dependent on the care of his sister Mary, herself in her 80s, and a kindly neighbour named Susanna Snook. At 69 years old, Owen was confined to a chair and incapable of walking, his once daring life reduced to a slow, quiet existence. Yet, his family had an unusual history of longevity for the era. His father, John Parfitt, lived to 62, well above the average life expectancy at the time. Even more remarkable was his mother, who reportedly lived to the age of 97, an impressive feat by any standard, past or present. Despite his condition, Owen remained sharp-witted and strong-willed, a man not easily underestimated. And in a close-knit community like Shepton Mallet, where everyone knew each other and outsiders were rare, his presence was well known, which makes what happened next all the more mysterious. Owen Parfitt's final and most infamous adventure didn't take place on a battlefield or stormy sea. It happened on a quiet, sun-warmed porch in the sleepy village of Shepton Mallet. The exact year remains uncertain. Some claim it was 1763, others swear by 1768, but the core of the tale remains chillingly unchanged. It was a warm afternoon, the kind that made even the elderly want to sit outside and soak in the gentle breeze. Parfitt, age 69 and nearly immobile from years of illness, asked to be taken outside. As we know, he could no longer walk. His sister Mary and the neighbour Susanna carefully carried him to a wooden chair on the front porch of their cottage. They wrapped him in a blanket to shield him from the wind. Across the narrow road, just a few yards away, several farm workers were going about their day. The area was quiet, but not isolated. Any unusual movement near the Parfitt home would have been noticed, especially someone approaching the paralysed man sitting alone on the porch. Mary went inside briefly to fetch a coat, as the evening air started to cool. She was gone only a few minutes. When she came back out, Owen was gone. Just gone. The chair was empty and his blanket on the ground. There was no sign of a struggle, no footprints, no sounds had been heard. And most baffling of all, the nearby workers swore they hadn't seen anyone approach or leave the house. In full-blown panic, Mary called out for help. Neighbours and farmers rushed to search the area. They scoured the road, the yard, and the surrounding countryside. It was unthinkable. How could a man who couldn't walk, who could barely move, just vanish without a trace? But that's exactly what happened. The authorities were quickly notified, and they too combed the area. They questioned every villager, followed every possible lead. Even search dogs were brought in to sniff out any trail that might have been left behind. It spread beyond the village into the surrounding countryside, across forests, along riverbanks, into old buildings and forgotten paths. Still nothing. That day, heavy rainfall started and stayed, destroying any and all possible traces. We have to remember this was the late 18th century, so the police and everybody could just search to the best of their capacity. But the heavy rain washed it all. No footprints, no blood, no signs of a body being dragged or carried, no suspicious travelers. No one saw anything, no one heard a sound. Owen Parfitt had simply vanished. The lack of evidence only made things worse. How does a man who can't walk disappear in broad daylight, with people just a few yards away? As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into years, Owen Parfitt's disappearance became more than just a mystery. It became folklore. With no trace ever found, speculation flourished. Everyone had a theory. Some made sense, others not so much. One of the most discussed theories is also the simplest, that Owen was abducted. Maybe enemies from his past came calling. Maybe he had something. Money, secrets, revenge-worthy history that someone wanted. Back then, anarchy wasn't uncommon, and stories of highwaymen and thieves weren't just tales to scare children. Supporters of this theory point to how clean the scene was. No struggle, no noise. It must have been quick, planned, deliberate. But even this idea has holes. Owen couldn't walk. He couldn't run. Moving him would have taken effort, time. Surely someone would have noticed. The farm workers across the road just steps away saw nothing. Then there are the whispers, the darker, stranger explanations. Some say the devil himself came for Owen Parfitt, that something otherworldly took him from that chair in the blink of an eye. It sounds outlandish, but in a time and place where religion and superstition walked hand in hand, people listened. After all, a storm rolled in that very evening, and his sister reportedly insisted for the rest of her life that he had been taken by a force not of this world. Others spun tales of pirates dragging him off in the dead of day, hoping to squeeze secrets about buried treasure from the old sailor. As time passed, these stories only grew wilder, told and retold around fireplaces and pub tables. A third theory suggests that Owen may have staged the whole thing, that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as paralyzed as he seemed, that with help, he escaped to start a new life elsewhere. But again, he was nearly 70, weak, and dependent on others for the most basic tasks. If it was a trick, it left no trail, no note, no slip-up, just silence. Each theory has its supporters, each has its skeptics, but all have one thing in common. They can't explain the total absence of evidence, and so the legend was born. To truly grasp the chilling nature of Owen Parfitt's disappearance, you have to step into his world, a world where superstition and folklore shaped everyday life as much as fact and reason. 18th century England was a place of contradiction. Enlightenment ideals were beginning to take hold, ideas of science, logic, and evidence. But in villages like Shepton Mallet, old beliefs still ran deep. Witchcraft, spirits, curses, and other worldly forces weren't just the stuff of bedtime stories, they were serious concerns. People feared the unknown because it was unknown. So when Owen Parfitt vanished, it didn't just feel like a mystery, it felt like something unnatural, something wrong. Over time, the tale grew teeth. Owen's story became part of the village's folklore, passed on like a dark lullaby. While his story is intriguing and mysterious, and possibly dark, I'll have to burst the bubble right now. Because modern psychology offers another lens through which to view the case, one grounded in human behavior, perception, and memory. In close-knit communities, stories often evolve through oral retelling. Each generation adds its own details, sometimes unintentionally. This phenomenon, known as memory distortion or collective misremembering, can take a relatively mundane event and transform it into something far more mysterious. Imagine this. Perhaps Owen was removed from the porch by someone familiar, a friend or relative helping him inside while Mary was gone. But in the confusion of the moment and panic that followed, nobody remembered seeing it. The brain, when faced with missing information, tries to fill in the blanks. In times of fear or trauma, those mental gaps can quickly be filled with the extraordinary. Psychologists also point to our cognitive bias toward pattern and meaning. We want things to make sense. A man vanishing from a chair without witnesses doesn't make sense. But ghosts, devils, or secret revenge plots, those feel like explanations, even if they're impossible to prove. Owen's case may have started as a real mystery, but it became a legend because our minds crave closure. And when closure doesn't come, the unknown becomes a canvas for imagination. In the end, maybe what makes the Owen Parfitt mystery so enduring isn't just the absence of evidence, it's the way the human brain reacts when faced with a story it can't fully explain. Now, another point I'd like to mention is that Owen's case of vanishing may seem unique. Elderly, paralyzed man disappearing in the middle of a quiet English village. But in the broader history of mysterious disappearances, his story finds strange resonance with others who also slipped beyond explanation. Take the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers, for example. In 1900, 3 men stationed on a remote Scottish isle disappeared without a trace. The lighthouse was found in perfect working order, food still in the kitchen, oil lamps freshly filled, but not a soul remained. The logbooks hinted at a storm and nervous behavior in the days before, but nothing explained how 3 experienced men could vanish from an isolated outpost with no witnesses and no remains. Like Owen, the keepers were in a confined space, visible, isolated, and with limited mobility. And just like Shepton Mallet, Flannan was a place where the unusual couldn't go unnoticed, yet the impossible happened. In both cases, search parties combed the area. In both cases, they found nothing, just empty spaces where people should have been. Now you might say, but maybe they jumped in the sea, and that's how they disappeared. Okay, I understand your point, but what about the strange case of Benjamin Bathurst, a British diplomat who vanished in 1809? One moment he was inspecting his carriage in a busy village in Prussia, the next he was gone. No cry for help. No sign of struggle. It was as though he stepped through a crack in reality. Bathurst was a man of status, moving through a populated area, yet no one saw what happened. Sound familiar? What ties these cases together isn't just the lack of evidence, it's the defiance of logic. How does someone vanish in plain sight, with no time, no opportunity, and no witnesses? Owen Parfitt's story may be older, but it sits comfortably alongside these other unsolved disappearances. Each case leaves behind the same hollow ache, a moment where time hiccups and someone is lost, not to death, not to accident, but to the unknown. It's these echoes across history that remind us Owen wasn't the first to vanish without a trace, and he won't be the last. Owen Parfitt's disappearance didn't just confuse, it was haunted. Long after the search parties gave up and the whispers died down, his story remained. In Shepton Mallet, it became a legend, a ghost story, yes, but one rooted not in fantasy, but in something disturbingly real. The tale passed from one generation to the next, like a family heirloom. Then, in 1813, decades after that warm afternoon when Owen vanished, the mystery suddenly flared to life again. During routine construction in Shepton Mallet, workers dug up a human skeleton. Whispers turned to gasps. Could it finally be Owen? Theories reignited. Had he been buried in secret, murdered and hidden in plain sight? But before imaginations could run too far, the truth arrived. Medical officials confirmed the skeleton belonged not to an elderly man, but to a young woman. Just like that, Owen slipped back into the shadows. Another chance came in 1933, when more construction stirred the soil beneath the town. Hopes flickered, but this time there were no bones, no revelations, just silence. And yet, the silence never settled. Even today, over 2 centuries later, the mystery hasn't lost its grip. Owen Parfitt's disappearance isn't just a historical oddity, it's a puzzle that still lives in the minds of anyone who hears it. It inspires podcasts, online debates, TV documentaries, and endless speculation from amateur sleuths and seasoned historians alike. Some have tried to reanalyze old records with modern forensic tools. Others chase threads in forgotten archives, hoping for a spark. But the trail, if it ever truly existed, has long since gone cold. And still, we return to it. Maybe it's because this story taps into something timeless, our fascination with the unsolved, our fear of the unknown, our belief that no one should vanish without a trace. Owen Parfitt was a real man, in a real village, surrounded by real witnesses, and yet his final moments remain a blank page. That's why we still tell his story. After everything, the ghost stories, the pirates, the devil in the storm, I keep coming back to something far more human, something simple, something silent. What if Owen Parfitt never left that house? What if, in a moment of desperation or quiet rage, his sister, tired, old, and overwhelmed, did the unthinkable. Maybe it wasn't premeditated. Maybe it was a snap, a whisper of grief or resentment that spiraled too far. Maybe she just wanted peace in her final years. No more caretaking, no more burden. And while the village searched the fields and ditches, calling out his name, what if Owen was already dead, hidden in the very place they started? No one would have suspected her. She was the frail, caring sister. She raised the alarm, played the part, and the storm that night. It washed away not just clues, but the urgency. The chaos gave her time. It's not the most sensational theory, but maybe it's the most believable. Not pirates, not demons. Just one quiet act, in one quiet house. Owen Parfitt vanished without a sound, and left behind a silence that's lasted for centuries. Maybe we'll never know what really happened on that summer afternoon in Shepton Mallet, but the mystery still lingers, whispering through time. Do you believe it was something supernatural, a clever cover-up, or something else entirely? Let me know what you think happened to Owen Parfitt in the comments below. And if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay curious. I'll see you in the next one. People vanish every day. But what if they vanish without a trace? No body, no blood, no sound, just gone? Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people disappeared in the same remote region of Vermont. An experienced hunter, a college student, a veteran on a bus, a child, a hiker, all vanished under different circumstances, yet all within reach of the same dark mountain. This is the story of the Bennington Triangle, a place where reality seems to bend, where legends whisper of cursed woods, and where the forest doesn't just watch, it takes. It all started with a feeling. Something wasn't right about Glastonbury Mountain. Long before anyone called it the Bennington Triangle, locals talked about strange silences in the woods, about how the air felt heavier out there. Native American tribes avoided the mountain entirely, except to bury their dead. They believed the land was cursed. Whatever lived there, they didn't want to disturb it. One old legend talks about a man-eating stone, a rock that would supposedly open up and swallow anyone who stepped on it. It sounds like a myth, but hikers have pointed out that the area does have sinkholes. That might explain the story, or it might not. And that's not the only strange feature here. Cairns, man-made stacks of rocks, are scattered throughout the forest. No one knows who built them or why. Some say they were meant as markers. Others think they were warnings. Glastonbury itself has always struggled to survive. Chartered in 1761, it remained mostly uninhabited for decades. In 1872, the town saw its first major transformation as it became a logging community. A 9-mile train line was constructed to connect Glastonbury to Bennington, and coal kilns supported the booming lumber operations. By 1880, the town had a population of 241, with a post office and a school. It looked like a place finally finding its footing, but in 1892, the first sign of deeper trouble arrived. A resident named Henry McDowell killed a man named John Crowley during a confrontation and fled into the woods. Though he was captured and sent to a hospital, McDowell escaped and was never seen again. Just 5 years later, another man, John Harbour, was found dead from a gunshot wound. His killer was never found. Despite these dark turns, Glastonbury made one last attempt at reinvention. In 1898, with the logging industry dying, the town tried to become a mountain resort, complete with a hotel, trolley, and casino. But it didn't last. A massive snowstorm destroyed the railroad, isolating the town and crushing its final hopes. The floodwaters that followed only sealed its fate. By 1938, Glastonbury was officially unincorporated. What's left now are just a few scattered foundations, old logging trails, and fewer than a dozen year-round residents. The town is more ghost than place. And then there's the silence. Visitors often remark on it. No birdsong, no rustling, no sounds of life. Just a deep, heavy quiet that seems to press in from all sides. The kind of silence that makes people uneasy. The kind that feels like it's watching you back. On November 12, 1945, the Bennington Triangle claimed its first known victim, 74-year-old Middy Rivers. Middy was not an ordinary outdoorsman. He was a seasoned hunter and guide, intimately familiar with every trail, hollow, and clearing of the vast forest. That day, he led a hunting party near an ominously named place, Hell Hollow. At around 4 p.m., Middy separated briefly from the group, confidently heading down a familiar path back toward camp. But minutes became hours, and as twilight faded to darkness, concern began to seep into the minds of his companions. Rivers had simply vanished. Despite immediate and thorough searches, hundreds of volunteers combing through the dense, tangled woods, the forest refused to surrender Middy. The only traces left behind were a spent rifle cartridge matching his own, found on the forest floor, and later, a solitary handkerchief discovered by chance in the spring following his disappearance. No animal attack, no accident, no logical explanation was ever found. Middy Rivers had stepped into the shadows of Glastonbury, leaving behind only a mystery. What people didn't know back then was that he was only the first. On December 1st, 1946, just 1 year after Middy Rivers mysteriously vanished, the Bennington Triangle claimed another victim, Paula Jean Weldon, an 18-year-old sophomore at Bennington College. After finishing her shift at the college dining hall, Paula returned to her dorm room, changed into her hiking clothes, and decided to explore part of Vermont's famous Long Trail. She was dressed casually, wearing jeans, lightweight sneakers, and a bright red jacket, unsuitable attire for the anticipated cold temperatures that would set in as night fell. Paula didn't take any extra clothing or gear, suggesting she didn't plan to be gone long. She left campus and hitched a ride from a local contractor, Louis Knapp, who dropped her off near Furnace Bridge, close to Route 9. From there, Paula either walked or caught another ride the remaining distance to the Long Trail at Woodford Hollow. Once on the trail, Paula encountered a group of hikers descending as she was heading upwards. She stopped briefly to ask them questions about the trail, perhaps confirming her route. She continued onward along Harbour Road, heading north as daylight quickly faded into twilight. Witnesses reported seeing her clearly, the vivid red of her jacket standing out sharply against the dimming woods. Darkness began to envelop the area as Paula approached the end of Harbour Road. It was here, near the Bowlesbrook Valley and just past the Fay Fuller camp, that confirmed sightings abruptly ceased. Though many presumed she continued deeper into the increasingly dark and foreboding forest, no further evidence or sightings ever surfaced. By morning, her absence raised alarms. An intense search ensued, involving over 1,000 volunteers, aircraft support, and even the FBI. But the forest remained silent, revealing nothing. No footprints, no clues, not even the striking red jacket that had made her so visible. Paula Jean Weldon had simply vanished, swallowed by the Bennington Triangle, leaving a legacy of fear, mystery, and unanswered questions in her wake. Exactly 3 years to the day after Paula Weldon vanished, the Bennington Triangle took another victim under even stranger circumstances. On December 1st, 1949, 68-year-old James Tedford, a World War I veteran, was returning by bus from visiting relatives in St Albans back to his residence at the Vermont Soldiers' Home in Bennington. His relatives had watched him board the bus, and at around 6:15 p.m., Tedford was positively identified in Burlington, where he spoke briefly with an acquaintance before transferring onto the Bennington-bound bus. From this point forward, accounts grow increasingly unsettling. The bus driver later recalled seeing a man resembling Tedford possibly stepping off the bus in Brandon, a village about 70 miles from Bennington. That same evening, Brandon police investigated reports of a man matching Tedford's description, acting queerly downtown, but no concrete evidence ever confirmed his presence there. Strangest of all, when the bus finally pulled into Bennington, James Tedford was nowhere to be found, despite his luggage and personal belongings still resting neatly on his seat. Curiously, no passengers or the driver could definitely explain when or how he disappeared during the trip. His absence wasn't reported until a full week later, when officials from the soldiers' home contacted police. Tedford, reportedly mentally ill and disheartened about returning to Bennington, had vanished without a trace. No clues, no body, and no rational explanation emerged, fueling chilling speculation that James Tedford had somehow stepped into thin air, becoming yet another unsolved enigma of the Bennington Triangle. On October 12th, 1950, tragedy struck again, this time involving an innocent child, 8-year-old Paul Buddy Jepson. Paul, a special needs boy, accompanied his mother on a seemingly routine errand, feeding pigs at the Bennington town dump. She parked their truck, leaving Paul safely inside, and stepped away briefly to tend to the animals. Only 30 minutes later, she returned to find the vehicle empty. Paul had vanished. Despite her frantic calls and immediate searches, Paul was nowhere in sight. sight. Authorities quickly launched an intensive search, scouring the dump and nearby woods, guided initially by bloodhounds. The dogs tracked Paul's scent along a nearby road, but surprisingly, stopped abruptly at an intersection. It was as though Paul had been suddenly lifted off the ground. His father offered a grim theory. Perhaps Paul had been accidentally struck by a passing car and hurriedly removed from the scene. Alternatively, he suggested that Paul's brown and tan clothing could have camouflaged him within the autumn leaves, hiding him from rescuers' sight. Yet another chilling detail echoed the disappearance of Paula Weldon. Paul had been wearing a bright red jacket, a garment that should have been easily visible against the forest's muted colors. Local superstition whispered warnings. Wearing red in these woods brought bad luck. For both Paula and little Paul, this ominous folklore seemed tragically prophetic. Despite exhaustive efforts, Paul Jepson, like those before him, disappeared completely, leaving no clues, no body, and deepening the sinister legend surrounding the Bennington Triangle. Just 16 days after young Paul Jepson disappeared, the Bennington Triangle struck again, this time claiming 53-year-old Frida Langer. An experienced hiker and hunter, Frida had ventured into the Somerset woods on October 28, 1950, accompanied by her husband Max and cousin Herbert Elsner. They intended a peaceful family getaway at their cabin near Somerset Reservoir. Early in the afternoon, Frida and Herbert embarked on a casual hike. Less than a quarter mile into their walk, Frida slipped and fell into a shallow stream, soaking her clothes. Laughing off the minor accident, she told Herbert she'd head back to their cabin for a quick change and would return soon. Herbert waited patiently by the stream, watching as Frida retraced her steps toward the cabin. But Frida never arrived. When Herbert finally returned, alarmed that she hadn't come back, Max confirmed his fears. Frida had vanished somewhere between the stream and their cabin, a disturbingly short distance away. An exhaustive search quickly unfolded, involving aircraft, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers meticulously scouring every inch of surrounding forest. Yet, the wilderness offered no answers, at least not immediately. 7 months later, on May 12, 1951, fishermen stumbled upon Frida's body, inexplicably discovered in an open field near the Deerfield River, an area previously searched multiple times. Her remains were so severely decomposed that no cause of death could be determined. Investigators speculated she might have fallen into a hidden pond, drowned, and later been washed downstream by spring flooding, but concrete evidence remained elusive. Frida's case remains especially unsettling, not only because she disappeared mere feet from safety, but because she's the only victim of the Bennington Triangle whose body ever surfaced, adding another layer of mystery to the eerie legend of Glastonbury Mountain. And then finally, in November 1950, 16-year-old Martha Jeanette Jones was reported missing after hitchhiking to seminary school in Manchester, Vermont. For an entire month, her absence went unnoticed. The school believed she had returned home to her family, while her parents assumed she was still attending classes. By the time authorities were contacted, Martha had already been missing for weeks. She was last seen somewhere along the route that passed near the same region where others had vanished. Despite the delayed response, searches were eventually launched, but like those before her, Martha left behind no trace. No witnesses, no belongings, no sightings. Her case received far less attention than the others, and yet it shares the same eerie hallmarks: a familiar area, a vulnerable moment, and an outcome that defies explanation. And now we get into the theories, because the facts only take us so far. Some theories, as you'll see, are logical, others less so. When 6 people vanish within a 5-year span, some just miles and even dates apart, one explanation seems chillingly logical: a serial killer. It's a theory that's haunted discussions of the Bennington Triangle for decades. What if these weren't accidents or disappearances at all, but calculated abductions, executed by someone who knew the woods as intimately as the victims did? On paper, the idea fits, at least at first. The disappearances are clustered in time and geography. They involve people walking alone, sometimes just moments from safety. Middy Rivers and Paula Weldon both vanished near the Long Trail. Paul Jepson and Frida Langer disappeared not far from each other in both time and location. But when you dig deeper, the theory starts to unravel. The victims were all vastly different ages, ranging from 8 to 74, male and female, hikers, bus passengers, even a child left in a car. Some vanished in open areas, others in dense woods. There's no pattern to how they disappeared, no signs of struggle, no body bodies found, no messages, and most importantly, no motive. A killer this careful would have had to be invisible or a ghost. Still, some locals remain convinced that a predator stalked the area in silence, someone who knew the terrain, used the remoteness of the wilderness as a perfect hunting ground, and vanished just as easily as the victims did. But if it was a killer, why did the disappearances suddenly stop? Or worse, what if they didn't? What if the Bennington Triangle simply learned to hide its secrets better? Some believe there's no mystery at all, that the answer lies in the claws and teeth of Vermont's wilderness. Bears, mountain lions, coyotes, predators capable of dragging off prey quickly, quietly, and completely. It's a theory that makes sense on the surface. The region surrounding Glastonbury Mountain is rugged and remote. Wild animals do roam those woods, and a sudden encounter could easily turn deadly, especially for a child like Paul Jepson or someone injured like Frida Langer. But then come the inconsistencies. Frida was only a short walk from camp. Paula Weldon was wearing a bright red jacket. If a predator had attacked, surely someone would have seen or heard something, especially on a populated trail. And Middy Rivers, a seasoned outdoorsman, if he'd been ambushed by wildlife, wouldn't there have been signs? A scream, a trail, blood? Then there's the most baffling of all, James Tedford. He disappeared from a moving bus. Unless Vermont's wildlife has learned to open windows and remove passengers unnoticed, it's a hard theory to apply universally. Nature can be cruel and unpredictable, but it rarely erases all evidence. And in the Bennington Triangle, what's more unsettling than an animal attack is the forest's silence afterward. No remains, no clues, no closure. Maybe there's no need for monsters or murderers. Maybe the wilderness itself is the threat. This theory suggests that the disappearances were tragic accidents, people slipping off trails, falling into ravines, getting lost in an unforgiving maze of forest. It's especially plausible in cases like Frida Langer, who vanished after falling into a stream, or Middy Rivers, hiking alone through a vast expanse of wilderness. The terrain around Glastonbury is steep, tangled, and often disorienting. A single misstep could lead to a fall, a head injury, or simply becoming hopelessly lost. With fast-changing weather, dropping temperatures, and wildlife lurking just out of sight, survival becomes a race against time. But again, questions linger. Why were no remains ever found in most of these cases? Not a piece of clothing, a shoe, a backpack, nothing. Search teams scoured the areas for days, sometimes weeks, using dogs, helicopters, even aircraft. And still, silence. Then there's James Tedford, who vanished on a bus, and Paul Jepson, whose scent trail stopped suddenly in the middle of a road. Even Frida, whose body was found, was discovered in an area that had already been searched. How does someone disappear so thoroughly, only to reappear months later in plain sight? If these were accidents, they were extraordinary ones, stacked with strange timing, eerie repetition, and details that don't quite add up. It's almost as if the land itself had a hand in choosing who to keep and who to return. For some, the disappearances in the Bennington Triangle can't be explained by anything earthly. No predators, no killers, no accidents, swallowed whole by something else. It begins with local legends. Long before colonial settlers ever set foot near Glastonbury Mountain, Native American tribes spoke of the land with caution and reverence. They avoided the area, calling it cursed. They believed the woods were haunted by angry spirits, and that the mountain was unfit for human habitation. It was only used to bury the dead. The forest, they said, took people. But the mystery didn't stop with folklore. Over time, modern theories emerged, paranormal in nature, but strangely persistent. Some suggest the Bennington Triangle is a window area, a spot where the veil between dimensions thins. Places like this, remote, quiet, and historically charged, are rumored to experience time slips, sudden disorientations, or even spontaneous teleportation. That might explain how Paula Weldon vanished in seconds, or how James Tedford disappeared from a moving bus, leaving only his luggage behind. Others point to electromagnetic anomalies. Compasses fail in some parts of the forest. Radio signals distort. People report sensations of being watched, of overwhelming dread, and in rare cases, even lost time. Could there be something environmental here? Some unseen force field warping reality, or pulling people into something they can't escape? And then there are the UFO theories. Vermont has long been a hotspot for strange lights in the sky, especially around the mid-20th century when the disappearances occurred. Witnesses have reported floating orbs, silent aircrafts, and beams of light cutting through the trees. Some believe the people who vanished were taken, not by nature, not by crime, but by something from above. To many, it sounds like science fiction, but the strange details linger. Trails that stop suddenly, bodies that appear months later where searchers had already been, Victims who simply should have been seen, but weren't. None of the theories on their own can explain it all. But when you combine folklore, lost time, electromagnetic interference, and historical disappearances, the Bennington Triangle begins to feel less like a place and more like a presence. Something old, something patient, something watching. Okay, so I'll be honest, when it comes to the Bennington Triangle, I don't have one single theory that explains everything, and maybe that's part of what makes it so unsettling. For some of the disappearances, I think the most likely explanation is tragic misadventure. Paula Weldon and Frida Langer were both women hiking alone in rugged remote areas. It's entirely possible they got lost or slipped into a hidden ravine or sinkhole, places where you could disappear completely, especially in dense wilderness. That doesn't explain the lack of signs or a scream, but sure, let's say it's a misadventure. And as for James Tedford, the man who vanished from the bus, I lean towards something more grounded. He was reportedly mentally unwell and was returning to a place he wasn't happy to be. If he was feeling dread or anxiety, it's possible he quietly got off at an earlier stop, disoriented, maybe confused, and simply wandered off. It's tragic, but it doesn't have to be supernatural to be terrifying. But then there are the ones I can't explain. Middy Rivers, an experienced outdoorsman, should have known those woods better than anyone. Paul Jepson was just a child who vanished in broad daylight, and Martha Jeanette Jones disappeared along a public road without anyone noticing for weeks. Those cases, I have no idea, and maybe that's what makes them linger the most. Not every mystery has to be solved to be real. Some of them just sit with you, heavy and unfinished. And so we've come to the end. The Bennington Triangle remains one of America's most haunting mysteries, a stretch of land where people walk into the woods and never return, a region shaped by eerie silence, tragic disappearances, and theories that only seem to deepen the uncertainty. Were these vanishings the result of natural dangers, human malice, or something far stranger? Were the victims simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or did something choose them? Decades later, we're still left without answers. But what do you think? Were these just tragic accidents? Or is there truly something unnatural hidden in the forests of Glastonbury? Picture this: a frozen Arctic night, the sky alive with dancing green lights. It's 1930, and a lone fur trapper named Joe LaBelle is snowshoeing through the silence toward the small Inuit village at Lake Anjikuni. He's expecting warmth and welcome, but instead he finds silence. No laughter, no barking dogs, no people. An entire community seems to have vanished into thin air, leaving behind one of the coldest enigmas in history. LaBelle has visited remote settlements before, so he knows how a lively Arctic village should look. Normally, there would be smoke drifting from cabins, the smell of cooking on the fire, the laughter of children. But as he steps into the camp, his snowshoes crunching on packed snow, an icy dread grips his heart. The settlement lies before him in perfect stillness, as if time itself has stopped. What has happened here? He calls out into the gathering darkness, voice swallowed by the emptiness. Then he begins peering into each hut. In the first tent, he finds a pot of stew still hanging above cold embers. Dinner has been abandoned mid-cook, the food frozen solid into an eerie portrait of interrupted life. Nearby, a half-mended fur parka lies draped over sleeping furs, needles still stuck in the fabric, as if someone simply stepped away from sewing and never came back. Fur parkas, rifles, thick blankets, and caribou hides. Every personal belonging is in place, untouched, waiting for owners who will never return. Around him, there are no footprints in the pristine snow, no signs of struggle or spilled blood, nothing suggesting anyone fled hastily. It's as if everyone, men, women, children, has dissolved into the Arctic air, leaving only the frozen remnants of their lives behind. LaBelle's heart thunders as he steps into the next hut. Inside, he finds more abandoned food, fish and dried meat carefully laid out on a hide, a meal prepared and forgotten. At the center of the encampment, a communal hearth has a fire that still smolders weakly, sending thin wisps of smoke curling into the starry twilight like ghostly fingers. The whole scene is painstakingly normal in every detail. and yet utterly wrong, fundamentally terrifying. Why would anyone leave tools, weapons, and provisions behind in this unforgiving wilderness? The store of hunting gear, the carefully arranged food supplies, everything a person would need to survive in the cold, is still here, as if the people expected to come right back. The Arctic cold can kill an unprepared soul in hours. This haunting contradiction makes LaBelle's skin crawl. Something unnatural has happened. Then, at the edge of the camp, he stumbles upon the worst sight of all. The village's sled dogs, the hardy huskies essential for travel and survival, lie lifeless in the snow, each still tethered to its stake. Label counts them with shaking hands. 6. No, 7 dogs in total. Once powerful, these animals are now gaunt skeletons, ribs stark against frost-covered fur. He winces. These dogs weren't just work animals. They were companions, lifelines in the wilderness. No rational person, especially seasoned Arctic dwellers like the Inuit, would tie up their dogs and abandon them to starve. The corpses of these dogs tell LaBelle a grim story. Whatever catastrophe struck this village happened long enough ago for even these survival-hardened animals to starve. No one returned for them. Lantern in hand, LaBelle ventures deeper, dread weighing on every step. Above, the northern sky has transformed into a magnificent canvas of stars and aurora. The green and blue lights dance across the empty village, casting an otherworldly glow on the scene. Every corner feels haunted, the air thick with the inexplicable terror of an untold horror. Finally, at the very edge of the settlement, his lantern light falls on something that makes his blood run cold. A grave, its stones carefully arranged in a ring, has been deliberately opened. The heavy rocks have been stacked neatly aside, revealing a gaping, empty hole in the earth. This is no random animal dig. The marker stones are undisturbed, still perfectly circular. Someone has come here and dug up a burial in the dead of an Arctic winter, when the ground is harder than concrete and there is no body. Who would perform such backbreaking, brutal work? And why? Standing there beneath the aurora-lit sky, LaBelle suddenly feels utterly alone and exposed in that frozen nightmare. Something, or someone, has driven out every living soul from this once peaceful camp and even disturbed the eternal rest of the dead. The image sears into his memory, an empty grave in an empty village, pale green lights shimmering overhead. The scene is no longer one of refuge, but a frozen tomb hiding incomprehensible secrets. He can't stay. Overcome by fear, LaBelle turns and flees. Snow flies behind him as he races into the darkness, heart pounding like a drum. Guided only by the cold moon and the dancing aurora, he retraces his steps through the woods, every nerve screaming that something unseen may be following. Fear nips at his heels like wolves. He must reach help. Miles through the trackless snow lie a lifeline, a telegraph station at the pass, Manitoba. By the time LaBelle stumbles into that remote outpost, frost clings to his beard and exhaustion warps his eyes. He collapses inside, desperation in his voice. "They're gone!" he gasps. Everyone, the entire village at Anjikuni Lake, all of them, vanished without a trace. The operator looks at him, bewildered and alarmed, as these chilling words crackle into the telegraph line. Joe LaBelle's story is out. The entire Inuit encampment has disappeared. The report flies across the wires, and suddenly what might have been dismissed as a cold-stricken man's ravings becomes an official matter. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police mobilize at once. A detachment of seasoned Mounties is hastily assembled and sent north through the frozen wilderness to investigate these extraordinary claims. Days later, under a starry sky, the Mounties reach the shores of Lake Anjikuni. Lanterns in hand, they approach the scene Joe LaBelle described. As they crest a snowbank, The sight before them is exactly as he said, and exactly as no one could rationally explain. Lantern light falls on kayaks pulled up on the icy lake shore. Sealskin-hulled boats sit glazed in thick ice, untouched for weeks. Tents and log cabins stand neatly intact. Inside, everything is in place. Rifles propped against walls, furs arranged for warmth, and supplies neatly stacked. Every hunting tool, every bit of stored food remains right where people would have left them. Over the fire pits, they find meals meant to nourish a family, now frozen and abandoned. Fish hang from racks, thick with ice. A pot of stew is stiff and congealed. Loaves of bread lie shaped but unbaked beside a cold oven. It's a perfectly normal Arctic village, and yet no one is there to eat, to live, to be found. The Mounties' own sled dogs nervously whine as a faint, sickly sweet smell drifts through the camp. Guided by instinct, one officer follows it and finds the 7 skeletal huskies exactly where LaBelle said they would be, still tied to their stakes in the snow. The sight makes the officers shudder. These dogs had been left to starve to death, an inconceivable act. Every detail matches LaBelle's report. 7 frozen bodies of dogs, tethered and skeletal. The gravesite deliberately dug open and empty. Supplies and clothing untouched. Not a single person in sight. No one calls back when the Mounties shout. They search the cabins and the tree line, their voices echoing across the frozen lake. There is nothing. No rustling in the woods, no footprints leading away. Any tracks that might have existed have long since been erased by drifting snow. Or perhaps the villagers never had the chance to flee on foot at all. An official report later concludes the unthinkable. Roughly 25 Inuit men, women and children had likely been missing from this camp for almost 2 years, months before Joe LaBelle's arrival. For all that time, the village lay abandoned under the northern sky. Cooking pots filled with food slowly froze over cold fires. Sleeping furs lay undisturbed, and day by day, the silent snow piled higher. Not a single living soul remained to raise an alarm or seek help. The news search expands. The Mounties radio neighboring trading posts and Inuit communities. But there is nothing. No word of the missing, no deserted camps, no hints of an exodus. Hundreds of miles around, the wilderness yields no clues. The desertion of Angie Cooney's people is complete and utter. The mysterious disappearance of Angie Cooney's villagers is too strange to stay hidden forever. By late 1930, word reaches the public press, but not with the fanfare one might expect for such a chilling story. On November 27, 1930, a small newspaper in Virginia, the Danville Bee, runs a sensational headline. Vanished Eskimo tribe gives North mystery stranger than fiction. The article, written by reporter Emmett E. Kelleher, spells out all the bizarre details. Joe LaBelle's frozen stew, the half-finished sewing projects, the 7 starved sled dogs, the opened and emptied grave. To readers huddled in their warm homes, the account reads like a horror tale come true. An entire village, its people gone without a trace, as if plucked from existence by an unseen hand. Kelleher's vivid storytelling paints a picture of nightmares. Needles still in fabric, meals frozen mid-preparation, a grave desecrated in the cold. The article must have given its readers goosebumps. It certainly captured imaginations. Yet even with such a dramatic scoop, the story does not explode onto front pages nationwide. Angie Cooney was on the very fringes of the world in 1930, affecting Inuit living far from major cities. To most of North America, it remained a curiosity, a bizarre northern tale that might be shared around campfires or read in late-night pulp magazines, but not front-page news. After the initial reports, the vanishing village slipped back into obscurity. For almost 30 years, Anji-kuni becomes a whispered legend, known only in hushed stories among trappers and in local lore. Then, in 1959, a twist of fate brings the mystery back into the spotlight. Radio commentator and author Frank Edwards discovers the old tale and breathes new life into it. In his bestseller, Stranger Than Science, he devotes a chapter to the vanished village, reliving the eerie details with dramatic flair. Suddenly, a whole new generation is introduced to Anji-kuni's legend. From that moment on, the story takes on a life of its own. Writers and broadcasters embellish and expand the narrative. Each retelling adds frissons of suspense, some drawn from careful research, others spun from the imagination. The vanishing village of Anji-kuni becomes a staple of paranormal literature and mystery anthologies. It's a story that demands an explanation, and people eagerly construct them. Over the years, countless theories have been offered to explain the Anji-kuni disappearance. They range from the scientific to the supernatural. We'll explore a few of the most talked about ideas. One of the most sensational theories is that extraterrestrials were involved. According to reports from the time, local trapper Armand Laurent and his two sons claim to have seen something extraordinary in the sky several nights before Labelle's discovery. They described a huge metallic cylinder drifting overhead, reflecting moonlight. As they watched, the cylinder reportedly morphed its shape, lengthening and becoming more pointed like a bullet, before suddenly shooting off at tremendous speed toward Lake Anji-kuni. To UFO enthusiasts, this sounds like an alien spacecraft on a mission. In their view, perhaps the villagers of Anji-kuni were collected as specimens by beings from another world. In this scenario, the entire community could have been beamed aboard a ship, explaining their total absence. Even the empty grave might make sense. Maybe the aliens took the remains of the dead as well, either out of curiosity or for some unknown purpose. And what of the strange blue lights some Mounties reported seeing over the lake during the investigation? Those shimmering, pulsing blue glows on the horizon could easily be interpreted as the flicker of an alien engine or a scanning beam, rather than the familiar aurora. If any creature had the power to snatch dozens of people at once without leaving a trace, these believers argue, it would explain how Anji-kuni emptied out in a single night. It's a chilling idea. A small Arctic village taken straight off the map by an intelligence far beyond human understanding. To some, it makes as much sense as anything else in this baffling case. Not all theories turn to flying saucers. Some look into indigenous folklore for answers, speaking of forces far older than technology. Among the most haunting is the possibility of a Wendigo or similar evil spirit. In Cree and Algonquin legends, the Wendigo is a cannibalistic demon of insatiable hunger, said to roam the frozen wilderness. Tales tell of entire hunting parties or villages driven mad by the Wendigo's influence, turning upon each other or being consumed by this monster. Imagine then that Anji-kuni's end came not at the hands of men or aliens, but by a malevolent spirit of the north. The clues have an eerie resonance in this light. The deliberately opened grave, for example. In many Wendigo stories, these creatures crave human flesh, living or dead. Could the emptied grave signify something as monstrous as that? Some accounts of Wendigo encounters even describe unnatural powers, like the ability to vanish without a trace into the forest. Of course, this kind of explanation appeals more to legend and superstition than to science. But in the long Arctic winter, when survival is at its brink, fears can take on a life of their own. It's a theory that taps into a deep, primal dread, that sometimes the most dangerous things are the ones we cannot see. Then, there are the grounded human explanations. Many researchers believe the truth may be far less fantastical. One practical theory is that the villagers simply fell victim to a sudden, deadly epidemic. In 1930, diseases like influenza, measles, or tuberculosis could sweep through a remote community with devastating speed. If such an outbreak occurred, it might have killed many at once. The survivors, fearing the same fate, could have fled in terror, leaving the bodies of their loved ones behind. In the chaos, some houses would have been left intact, with the dead not buried, and provisions untouched in the panicked exodus. Picture, perhaps, that a flu epidemic struck in autumn, decimating the village overnight. A handful of survivors run into the woods in shock, too frightened to clean up or explain. Weeks later, when Lebel arrived, he would have found exactly what he did: cabins full of the living routine turned on its head, the dead in the open, and no people in sight. To a lonely trapper, it would certainly look supernatural, even if the reality was a tragic human one. A related idea is that authorities covered up the true cause. Maybe something sensitive happened, an epidemic, an accident, a violent incident, and officials decided it was better quietly swept under the rug. Remember, in 1930, the Canadian North was remote, and news of Indigenous communities wasn't something that drew much scrutiny from governments. It's not impossible that records were murky, or that the story simply went undocumented at the time. In this view, the mysterious disappearance is just a legend hiding a bureaucratic or human failure. But before we dive too deeply into theories, skeptics remind us of the simplest possibility. Maybe the whole Anjikuni story never happened at all. From this perspective, the mystery is just that: a myth. A wild tale spun from a combination of sensational journalism and hearsay. Consider the source. The Danville Bee article was written by Emmett Kelleher, a reporter known for lurid stories. His account came from Virginia, relayed by telegraph messages from the pass, hundreds of miles from Anjikuni. It wasn't eyewitness reporting, it was secondhand. In fact, the real Mountie on scene, RCMP Sergeant J. Nelson, filed an official report shortly afterwards declaring no foundation for this story whatsoever. In other words, the police on the ground didn't find any evidence that matches the sensational account. Furthermore, the tale's protagonist, Joe Lebel, was portrayed as a veteran trapper. But in reality, records show he had just bought his first trapping license that very year. He was new to the region. It's possible he misunderstood or exaggerated what he saw. The Canadian Mounties themselves have been blunt about Anjikuni. Today, they call it an urban legend. On the RCMP's own historical folklore page, they write plainly that the Anjikuni disappearance story is not true. They note that Frank Edwards's book popularized the legend decades later, but stressed that patrol officers from 1930 recorded no untoward events or missing people. In short, the skeptics say the simplest explanation is that Anjikuni's vanishing was just a newspaper hoax or misunderstanding that spiraled into legend. The trails of evidence, the crazy lights, the empty graves, could have been confabulated or misinterpreted. No one alive today can definitively prove the village ever emptied overnight. Lake Anjikuni today is still much as it was when this story began. Remote, desolate, and beautiful in a stark way. It lies in Nunavut, accessible only by bush plane, snowmobile, or dog sled. The same freezing winters and brief wildflower-strewn summers endure. But there are no plaques or signs on its shores to tell travelers of the vanished Inuit village of 1930. On the ground, nothing marks that chilling night. And yet, for those who know the tale, the very silence of the place is uncanny. Stand there with the story in your mind, and you might feel a prickle on your skin. The wind through the spruce might sound like whispers of the past. It's easy to imagine looking over your shoulder, half expecting a figure between the trees, even though you know they're probably just shadows and cold air. Why does the legend endure? Perhaps because it speaks to something deep inside us all. The unimaginable fear that an entire community could vanish, leaving no trace of what happened. Whether or not you believe in flying saucers, wendigos, diseases, or human mistakes, the core image of Angie Cooney remains unforgettable. Picture it again. A subarctic night in November 1930. Bitter cold as death. A lone trapper finds traditional huts standing open to the wind, fires that should have warm food, meals frozen on the fire, and 7 sled dogs mummified in place. But no people. It is a tableau as haunting as the ghost ship Mary Celeste. Except this time the eerie vessel is a village made of wood and fir, stranded in ice instead of sea. In the end, all we are left with is a riddle. What really happened at the village of Angie Cooney? Was it a collective hallucination of a lone trapper? A science fiction nightmare of alien visitors? A curse from the cold wilderness? Or a real human tragedy covered up by silence? The truth, if it exists, must lie somewhere out on that frozen tundra, buried beneath decades of snow and time. Nearly a century later, the vanishing village of Angie Cooney still refuses to give up its secrets. It continues to send a shiver through anyone who hears its story, a reminder that some mysteries remain etched in the ice of human imagination, enduring and unfathomed, no matter how hard we try to solve them. A young woman crashes her car on a dark, snow-covered road and disappears without a trace. No phone calls, no messages, just an abandoned car, a cold wind sweeping through the trees, and 1,000 unanswered questions. But was Maura Murray a victim of foul play, or did she vanish by choice? 20 years later, the mystery still lingers, haunting the shadows of the White Mountains, whispering through the cold winter air. This is the story of Maura Murray. If you have heard of this case before, you've probably got the same story. A smart, athletic young woman, a nursing student, who mysteriously vanished without a trace. But who was Maura Murray, really? Maura was born on May 4th, 1982, in Brockton, Massachusetts. She grew up in a competitive but loving Irish Catholic family. As the fourth of 5 siblings, including her older sisters Kathleen and Julie, her older brother Fred, and a younger half-brother Kurt, Maura quickly learned to hold her own. The Murray family was all about sports, especially running. Her siblings ran track, and Maura sprinted ahead in their footsteps. She became a star athlete at Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, where she stood out not just for her speed but for their relentless determination. Maura's academic prowess matched her athletic skills. She earned acceptance into the prestigious United States Military Academy at West Point, where she studied chemical engineering. But after 3 semesters, she decided it wasn't the right fit. West Point was a world of discipline and pressure, a world that didn't seem to suit her. So, she transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst to pursue a nursing career, a choice that felt more like her, caring, empathetic, and always wanting to help. But Maura wasn't just a resume of achievements. Her sister Julie remembers her as the family's joke star. Quick-witted, clever, and fun, Maura knew how to bring a smile to any situation. She would send letters without a reason, little notes of kindness that captured who she was, but beneath that bright, generous personality, was there something else? Something only her closest family members could sense. November 2003. Maura Murray's life was not without its shadows. 3 months before she disappeared, she was caught using a stolen credit card to order food from several restaurants in Hadley, Massachusetts. It was a mistake, a small, almost petty crime, but one with consequences. The charge was set to be dismissed after 3 months of good behavior, but it hinted at something beneath the surface, a sense of restlessness, a willingness to take risks. February 5th, 2004. On February 5th, Maura was working a late shift at her campus security job when she received a phone call from her sister Kathleen. On the other end of the line, Kathleen was struggling, an ongoing battle with alcoholism, fresh out of rehab, only to be taken straight to a liquor store by her fiancé. For Maura, something snapped. She broke down crying uncontrollably. Her supervisor found her in a near catatonic state, just completely zoned out, as he later described. He escorted her back to her dorm, but Maura's silence spoke louder than any words. When asked what was wrong, she could only mutter 2 words: "My sister." But this explanation would not surface until 2017, 13 years later. In that time, the incident remained a mystery, a breaking point without a clear reason. February 7th, 2004. Just 2 days later, Maura's father, Fred, came to Amherst. The plan seemed simple: car shopping, a father-daughter dinner, a brief visit. That night, Maura borrowed her father's Toyota Corolla to attend a dorm party. But at 2:30 a.m. on February 8th, she crashed the car into a guardrail on Route 9 in Hadley, causing nearly $10,000 in damage. An accident report was filed, but there were no sobriety tests and no further investigation. Just a crash in the night, and a promise from Fred that insurance would cover it. But there were strange details. The time of the crash, the lack of a thorough check, and a call made from Fred's phone at 4:49 a.m. to Maura's boyfriend. No one knows who made that call or what was said. February 9th, 2004. By February 9th, Maura's life seemed to be caught in a quiet freefall. In the early hours of the morning, she was on her computer, searching MapQuest for directions to the Berkshire and Burlington, Vermont. She seemed to be planning something, but no one knew what. At 1 p.m., she emailed her boyfriend a message that seemed both loving and distant. "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking to anyone. I promised to call today, though. Love you, Maura." But it wasn't just her boyfriend she contacted. She made a call to a condominium association in New Hampshire, a place her family had vacationed before, but she didn't book anything. Was she trying to escape somewhere familiar? Or was she testing options, unsure of where to go? Then, at 1:24 p.m., she sent an email to her nursing school supervisor claiming there had been a death in the family. But that was a lie. There was no death, no funeral to attend. But it was enough to excuse her absence. In the hours that followed, Maura's actions seemed like those of someone preparing for a journey, a call to a nursing student, though the reason remains unknown. A call was made to inquire about hotel bookings in Stowe, Vermont, but no reservation was made. A final call to her boyfriend, which went to voicemail. Her dorm room told its own story. When police searched it later, they found most of her belongings packed neatly in boxes, the walls bare, as if she had already decided to leave. On top of the boxes was a printed email to her boyfriend, hinting at trouble in their relationship. At 3:15 p.m., Maura withdrew $280 from an ATM. Security footage showed she was alone, her expression neutral. She then went to a nearby liquor store, purchasing about $40 worth of alcohol, Bailey's, Kahlua, vodka, and a bottle of Franzia wine. Again, she was alone. She picked up accident report forms from the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles, a lingering detail from the crash just 2 days earlier. Her black 1996 Saturn was packed with clothing, toiletries, textbooks, and even her birth control pills. It seemed like a journey without a clear destination. And at some point, she drove away from the familiar safety of her campus. Around 7:27 p.m., a resident along Route 112 in Woodsville, New Hampshire, heard a loud thump. Looking outside, she saw a car, Maura's black Saturn, stuck against a snowbank, its front end damaged. The witness would later claim she saw a man smoking a cigarette inside the car, but this detail would change. A trick of the light, perhaps, or a red glow from a phone. A school bus driver, Butch Atwood, stopped to help. He saw a young woman, Maura, walking around the car, cold and shivering. He offered to call for help, but she refused, insisting she had already called AAA. But he knew it was a lie, since there was no cell service in the area. Suspicious, Butch went home and called the police himself. At 7:46 p.m., a Haverhill police officer arrived at the scene. But Maura was already gone. No sign of her, just her car, damaged and abandoned. But the car said a lot. The driver's side windshield was cracked. Both airbags had deployed. Red stains that looked like wine were scattered inside. A damaged box of Francia wine sat in the back seat. An empty beer bottle rolled on the floor. But there were also other things: gloves, jewelry, a stuffed animal, and Maura's favorite book, Not Without Peril, a story of survival and tragedy in the White Mountains. Her debit card, credit cards, and cell phone were gone, never used again. And most chillingly, a rag was stuffed into the tailpipe, a detail police would later claim was meant to prevent the car from starting. But who would do that? Maura or someone else? By 8 p.m., police and emergency services were on the scene. But Maura was gone, as if she had simply walked off the earth. A witness claimed to see a young person walking along Route 112 around 8:30 p.m., 4 miles from the crash site. But this sighting would only be reported months later. In a span of just minutes, Maura Murray's world had gone from confusion to complete disappearance. When Maura's car was found abandoned on that snowy stretch of Route 112, the first question was simple. Where was Maura? But that question quickly spiraled into a maze of confusion and dead ends. By the afternoon of February 10th, 2004, less than 2 hours after her disappearance, Maura was officially declared a missing person. Police issued a "Be on the lookout" alert. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a dark coat, jeans, and carrying a black backpack. But for a missing person case, everything seemed oddly disconnected. Fred Murray, Maura's father, only learned that her car had been found when he got a voicemail, left on his home answering machine while he was away on a work trip. By the time he was contacted directly, precious hours had already slipped by. Fred rushed to Haverhill, New Hampshire, arriving before dawn on February 11th. But he wasn't alone in his desperation. At 8 a.m., search teams from the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department began scouring the area, joined by Maura's family. Tracking dogs were brought in. One picked up Maura's scent from a glove and traced it 100 yards east of her abandoned car. And then, nothing. The scent vanished. Investigators suggested she might have left the area in another vehicle, but there was no proof. Her boyfriend, along with his parents, arrived that evening. They were questioned, and in a moment of strange uncertainty, he turned on his phone to find a voicemail, one he swore sounded like Maura sobbing. But this call wasn't normal. It was traced to a calling card issued by the American Red Cross. A glitch, a mistake, or something far stranger. Within days, the investigation splintered into two conflicting ideas. Police leaned towards the simplest explanation. Maura had either run away to escape her life, or she had taken her own life. They even publicly suggested that she was intoxicated at the crash site. But this didn't match what the bus driver had told them. He insisted Maura didn't appear drunk or even disoriented, just cold and nervous. Her family immediately rejected the runaway theory. They knew Maura was struggling, but disappearing without a trace, leaving behind everything, her family, friends, and dreams of becoming a nurse. It didn't make sense. For them, something else had to be at play. On February 12th, Fred and Maura's boyfriend held a press conference, pleading for information. That same day, police publicly listed her as endangered and possibly suicidal. The search expanded. The Haverhill police were joined by the FBI just 10 days after her disappearance, an unusual step for a missing person case. A helicopter with thermal imaging swept the snow-covered forests. Ground teams scoured the woods, walking in freezing conditions. Cadaver dogs combed the area, but the silence of the forest seemed to swallow any trace of Maura. Even as the ground searches continued, new clues only led to more confusion. Maura's older sister found a pair of ripped white women's underwear in the snow near a secluded trail on February 26th. For a moment, hope flashed. Maybe this was a lead, but DNA testing ruled them out. They didn't belong to Maura. By the end of February, Maura's family was exhausted. They checked out of their motel, but Fred refused to give up. He returned nearly every weekend, wandering the dense woods, knocking on doors, searching for any sign of his daughter. But all he found was frustration and suspicion. Locals began complaining about trespassing. The police warned him to respect private property. But how do you respect distance when your daughter is missing? Then, just weeks later, a chilling parallel emerged. Brianna Maitland, an 18-year-old from Montgomery, Vermont, disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. An abandoned car, a young woman vanishing without a trace. Media quickly drew comparisons, and whispers of a serial predator spread. But police dismissed any link between the two cases. In July 2004, with the summer heat melting away the snow, police launched another search. Nearly 100 searchers, state troopers, and volunteers combed a 1-mile radius around Maura's crash site. The focus was on one item, her black backpack, the one she was last seen carrying. But like everything else, it seemed to have vanished. But then, a possible break. A local man approached Fred Murray with a rusty, stained knife. He claimed it belonged to his brother, who lived less than a mile from where Maura's car had been found. The man claimed his brother and his brother's girlfriend had acted suspiciously after the disappearance. He even suggested the knife had been used to kill Maura. Days later, the brother reportedly scrapped his car. It was a disturbing story, too disturbing to ignore. But when police investigated, the leads crumbled. Family members claimed the man who turned in the knife was simply trying to get reward money, that he was a known drug user. By late 2005, the search had shifted from desperate hope to legal action. Fred Murray filed lawsuits against several law enforcement agencies, demanding access to case files. But even this battle led nowhere. Online forums buzzed with speculation, with one user claiming to have seen a black backpack similar to Maura's behind a restroom at Pemigewasset Overlook. Police acknowledged the tip, but never confirmed whether they investigated. As the years passed, Maura's case fell into a grim silence. In 2006, a team of retired detectives joined the investigation, believing that something more sinister than a simple disappearance had taken place. They weren't alone in their suspicions. Tom Shamshak, a former police chief, publicly stated, "This is something beyond a mere missing person case. Something ominous could have happened here." Rumors spread. Theories twisted and turned. Some claimed she had been taken. Others believed she had escaped to start a new life. And then, the strangest twist yet, an A-frame house just a mile from the crash site. Cadaver dogs were brought in, and they went wild in a closet, seemingly reacting to the scent of human remains. A piece of carpet was cut and sent for testing, but the results were never made public. What did they find? Or did they find nothing at all? By 2009, Maura's case was officially listed as a cold case. But for her family, for her father who kept returning to the White Mountains, and for the online communities who obsessed over every detail, it never truly went cold. In 2021, bone fragments were discovered on Loon Mountain, 25 miles from where Maura vanished. For a moment, hope resurfaced, only to be dashed when the remains were confirmed not to be hers. 20 years later, Maura Murray is still missing. No trace, no definitive answers. Just a family caught in the darkness of a mystery that refuses to end. For many who have followed the disappearance of Maura Murray, one theory stands out above all others. foul play. It's a theory backed by more than just fear. It's the cold logic of a young woman vanishing on a dark, isolated road without a trace. Tim Pilleri and Lars Mittank, who have spent years studying this case, have repeatedly stated that they believe most people suspect foul play. They're not alone. Retired State Police Lieutenant John Healy, who investigated the case, summed it up with chilling simplicity. She got into the wrong car. She went to the wrong house. In his eyes, Maura was the victim of a crime of opportunity, a situation where a stranger with dark intentions saw a vulnerable young woman and acted. But what does crime of opportunity really mean here? Was Maura lured by someone offering help? Did she step into a car she thought would bring her to safety, only for it to become a trap? Maura's own family shares this fear. Her brother Curtis has said, "I think Maura was taken. I think she most likely got in the car with the wrong person, and nothing good came from that." Their father, Fred, who has spent 2 decades searching for his daughter, is even more certain. But if Maura was a victim of foul play, who was responsible? And how did they manage to make her disappear without a trace? One name has always lingered in the shadows of suspicion: Butch Atwood, the school bus driver who was the last known person to speak with Maura. On the surface, Butch seemed like a good Samaritan. He saw Maura standing by her crashed car, offered help, and even called the police when she insisted she didn't need assistance. But beneath this simple story are details that refuse to sit still. Details that make Butch's role in that night feel far more complex. First, there is his own behavior that night. After speaking with Maura, Butch drove his bus home, but instead of parking it in the usual spot beneath the floodlight, where he could have had a clear view of Maura's car, he backed it up beside his house, nearly hidden from view. A strange decision for a man who had just seen a young woman stranded in the cold. And there is his account of that night. Over time, Butch's descriptions of his encounter with Maura changed. In one version, he claimed she was standing outside her car, steady and sober. In another, she was inside, possibly intoxicated, needing to lean on the vehicle for support. Witnesses later claimed Butch even gave conflicting statements about whether she was alone or if he saw other vehicles pass. But it gets stranger. Shortly after speaking with Maura, Butch went back out to his bus, claiming he needed to do paperwork. But paperwork alone, in a cold, dark bus, when his girlfriend was inside the warm house. And while police would later search the area, there is no clear record of them conducting a forensic examination of Butch's bus. If Maura had entered that bus, if something had happened there, would anyone have known? Speculation around Butch doesn't stop at his behavior. There are even questions about his connections. Butch was known to be familiar with local law enforcement, a common connection in a small town. Some have whispered about a possibility, an unthinkable one, that Butch and others may have known more about that night than they have ever revealed. But if Butch was somehow involved, there are also questions. Why call the police at all? Why voluntarily insert himself into the investigation? Some argue it's a classic tactic. Killers inserting themselves into the story, making themselves witnesses to control the narrative. Of course, Butch Atwood was never formally named a suspect. He cooperated with the police, even taking a lie detector test, though there are conflicting reports about how well he performed on it. He later moved to Florida, where he passed away, taking with him any secrets he may have had. But whether Butch was involved or not, his strange actions and conflicting accounts add another layer of darkness to the theory of foul play. But for all the darkness that shrouds her case, there is another theory. One that paints Maura as the mastermind of her own disappearance. A theory that suggests she wasn't taken, but instead she ran. Some believe Maura was overwhelmed by her life. Legal trouble with a stolen credit card, her academic struggles, the crash of her father's car just 2 days before her disappearance. One mistake after another, each one adding to a quiet, crushing weight. Could Maura have decided to escape it all? According to Tim and Lance, the idea of Maura starting over somewhere new is a possibility they find compelling. Some even believe she might have joined an underground network, changing her identity, disappearing into a new life far from the scrutiny of her past. Canada is often mentioned, with an easy border to cross from New Hampshire and a place where a fresh start could begin. But there is a darker twist to this theory. Journalist James Renner, who has spent years investigating Maura's case, has suggested she may have been traveling in tandem with another driver, someone she trusted, someone who helped her disappear. But even Renner's theory is built on whispers and shadows. If Maura ran away, why has she never reached out? Why has there never been a single confirmed sighting? Was she so desperate to escape that she abandoned everyone she loved? Or is this theory just a comforting lie, an escape that never happened? 2 decades have passed since Maura Murray vanished on a cold, isolated road in New Hampshire. But her case remains anything but forgotten. For her family, it is a wound that never heals, a search that never ends. And now, that search has a new voice. In early 2024, Maura's sister, Julie Murray, launched a podcast titled Media Pressure: The Untold Story of Maura Murray. But this wasn't just another retelling of the same old mystery. It was a reclamation. Through the podcast, Julie shares her family's raw, unfiltered truth. The sleepless nights, the endless questions, the unbearable silence. It's not just about reaching a new audience. It's about reclaiming Maura's narrative from speculation and strangers. Julie recounts how, while recording with her father and brothers, they often broke down in tears. Yet the podcast is just one part of the family's fight. On the 21st anniversary of Maura's disappearance, they held another vigil at the crash site in Woodsville, New Hampshire, keeping the memory of Maura alive. But for her sister Julie, it wasn't enough. She has become a relentless advocate, using social media to correct misinformation, share updates, and keep Maura's case alive. In one episode, she revealed a chilling detail: a handwritten phone number found in Maura's car, a number that, according to her, was never investigated by police. When Julie called, the person on the other end claimed it was the first time anyone had asked them about Maura, but the police also stayed involved. In 2022, the FBI issued a national alert, and New Hampshire State Police launched new searches in Landaff and Easton. In 2024, they released an age progression photo of Maura, hoping someone might recognize her. Yet, like so many times before, the searches led to nothing. Still, the Murray family refuses to give up. Through the podcast, the vigils, and Julie's tireless advocacy, they fight to keep Maura's name alive. Because for them, Maura isn't just a mystery. She is a sister, a daughter, and a life that was interrupted. But with each passing year, the question remains: will the truth ever come to light? Or will Maura Murray be a name whispered in the cold winds of the White Mountains? Maura Murray's disappearance remains one of the most haunting mysteries in modern true crime, an unsolved puzzle with too many pieces that just don't fit. And you know, I usually like to wrap up these videos with my own theory. But this time, I don't have one. I've gone over the facts, the theories, the strange details, and yet, I'm just as baffled as anyone else. Was Maura taken? Did she run? Or was it something we haven't even imagined yet? Honestly, I don't know. But if you want to dive even deeper into this case, I encourage you to check out Media Pressure: The Untold Story of Maura Murray, the podcast created by her sister, Julie. It's a first-hand look at the case from the people who lived it. And it might just be the closest we ever get to understanding what really happened to Maura. If you found this story interesting, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened to Maura Murray? Do you have a theory? I'd love to hear it. Until next time, stay safe.